Hello, mic test. Good afternoon, all. Welcome to the first plenary session on integrating global perspectives in Kerala's higher education. This session will discuss how Kerala's higher education institutions can adopt global perspectives to improve the quality of education, develop cross-cultural skills in students, and prepare them better for a world that's increasingly interconnected. The discussion will focus on strategies like internationalizing course content, encouraging student and teacher exchanges, and using digital platforms for global collaboration. The goal is to highlight practical ways to give students a broader outlook, critical thinking skills, and the adaptability needed to thrive in a rapidly changing world. Moderator of this session is Professor N.B. Verghese. He is serving as a distinguished professor at Ashank Desai Center for Policy Studies, IIT Bombay. He is also the former Vice Chancellor at National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration. I invite the panelists of this session. We have Professor Sriram Ramakrishna, Professor of Materials Engineering at the National University of Singapore, Professor Sabu Patmadas, Professor of Demography and Global Health, University of Southampton, Dr. Zakaria Matthew, Director, Center for Global Engagement and Senior International Officer, University of Michigan Flint, Dr. Shakila T. Shamsu, former officer on special duty for drafting national education policy under Ministry of Education, Government of India, Dr. Mahmood Kuria, faculty member at the School of History, Classics and Archaeology, University of Edinburgh. I request the moderator as well as the panelists in the dais to kindly initiate the discussion. I invite Professor N.B. Verghese to moderate the session.
Thank you very much. Friends, it is a first afternoon session, perhaps the first business session, dealing with the topic issues that we discussed in the morning, which will be continued in the discussion. I have a difficult task in the sense that the session is only for 1 hour and there are 5 speakers. So we had a panel discussion session with all the speakers. We have agreed that each speaker will be taking 7 to 8 minutes and transparency will not be used, so that we'll have at least 10 to 15 minutes for discussion. That's the way, the format. Since I am the chairperson, I do not want to preempt my speakers in the limited time. I would like to make only 2 or 3 points when we are discussing these issues. One important dimension that one needs to keep in mind is that it is not only that we had to learn from internationalization or international experiences, there are also certain lessons that can be drawn from Kerala to the international arena. One of the important things is that when should we talk about equity? Should we talk about equity in a sequential manner as part of the growth or after the growth? Kerala model of development has very clearly shown that you can have high levels of equity, social equality and economic equality even at lower levels of development. And this is a model, and Kerala model is an answer to this debate which continued to be considering whether you need to see it sequentially or see it simultaneously. This was a contribution that was made by Center for Development Studies in the early 1970s, and more specifically in 1974, the first major study done by the Center for Development Studies. And this is also an indication of how research has tried to shape the policy within the country and The second dimension I feel is that when you talk about equity and changes that are taking place, there are two models. One is market-based model, other is a state-based model. And if you see Korea and many other East Asian countries, you will find that the market tried to equalize wages, and as a result of that, economic inequality was attained by that. But if you go to some of the countries, especially in Kerala, if you see that it's the progressive state actions which led to equality, not only economic equality, but also in terms of educational equality that you are talking about, the differences between Travancore, Cochin, and Malabar region is a classic example of how state influenced intervened. A third point that I'll like to make is that Kerala is facing a problem because of, in a sense, over-education. Don't misunderstand me. We had to go a long way to reach universalization of higher education. So I am not saying that it is over-expanded. But what is happening is that the problem that we have, the highest levels of unemployment in India is perhaps in Kerala. The educated unemployment is perhaps in Kerala. You also have to navigate, negotiate, and devise strategies and evolve policies to see that how the question of unemployment, skill formation, etc., will be resolved in the context of expanding education. Let me clarify that I am not saying that Kerala higher education have over-expanded. And if you see Kerala State Council's programs, etc., or the state government's programs, etc., they are talking about 75% GER, they are talking about 60% GER, etc., by 2030-31. So I'm not taking an over-expansion, but even at the lower levels of 40% expansion, which is what is called as the massification stage of higher education, what we find is that there is a problem, a challenge that the Kerala economy and the education sector is facing. So these are the three important dimensions of development that I would like to highlight as an introduction. So we have eminent panelists dealing with the technological developments, dealing with the changes in the policy that can be discussed about it, and many other related dimensions. So I will not take much time. I will ask Professor Sriram to start the negotiation. Sir, your time starts now and you have only 7 to 8 minutes.
Mic test, yeah. Thank you, Professor Verghese, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. As an introduction, I just came from -2 degrees to +32 degrees. So you can imagine my brain is fluctuating. But Professor Verghese is very serious. He said, there is no room for you to cross beyond 7 minutes. So I must stick to that. The panel is about integrating global perspectives to the Kerala higher education. So I was listening to the morning session where we were introduced. We have an audience close to 2,000 online in presence. So we need to relate to what we say, not only for Kerala higher education, but also all other higher education institutions, ecosystems in different states and provinces of India. But of course, we can take Kerala as an example. So with that background, I like to say a few things directly, but stick to the same 8 minutes cutoff. Whatever I say is actually from the experience. I've been working at the National University of Singapore for 30 years. So I personally witness the transformation of our university as a top 8 universities in the world and a top 3 universities for interdisciplinary science. So these are the global rankings. And when I joined this university 30 years ago, it was unknown. So the last 30 years, it's a phenomenal transformation. And Singapore is also known as a global higher education hub. So the question is, what characterizes global higher education hub? One is you have world-class institutions. It doesn't mean every university has to be world-class, but you must have a high-quality institutions. Number two, in addition to high-quality few institutions, but every institution in higher education have to have a certain better standards. So how would we do that, or how we have done that? Is first one, we have done systematic benchmarking. So we have benchmarked ourselves with different institutions across the world. So I would encourage a process of benchmarking. So that gives an idea how and what you need to look for. Number two, we have done internationalization at home and internationalization in abroad. What that means is you are recruiting international students, faculty members to your universities. You're also sending your students, faculty members, colleagues to the overseas institutions. Again, in the morning speech, there was a mention that you are able to attract international students. We also know more than 1.3 million Indian students go abroad. So some sense is already happening, but the important thing is how much more you can do. And in terms of that, I have a suggestion is many of my students, many of my postdoctoral scientists, they're actually Malayali, and I know them. So if I know so many of them, I'm sure there are many Malayali researchers, faculty members, students in abroad. And probably there is a way you could have much deeper engagement with the diaspora. So that's something you could do. Number three, it's about promoting cross fields, interdisciplinary way. Recently, Chavez, he was given Nobel Prize for artificial intelligence. And he's actually, his mother is from Singapore, but he lived all his life in UK. So what he said is, you got to be good in two fields. So you're good in something, but you're also good in another field, and then explore. So in this case, he gave an example of artificial intelligence, which is the best, and then he applied to the proteomics, and then he won the Nobel Prize. He's only 45, or less than 45. The key is, why I emphasize is I'm not encouraging that we all have to go for Nobel Prize, limited. But most important thing is the world is changing, and it's clearly because of two things at this point in time. One is artificial intelligence. Whether we agree or not, it has been embedded in many things we do. So if you are someone in your early 20s, young generation, most likely everything you do in a day is touched by artificial intelligence already. So that's the case. Since the time is limited, I would not be able to illustrate, but later on I can illustrate that. So AI is there. Much more than that, science and technology-led innovation are being scaled up on a global scale, multi-jurisdiction. Those who are able to leverage them, able to be much stronger and richer. Professor Verghese said, even in Kerala, we do notice inequality. We see the inequality across India. There are rich people, but there are lots of poor people. You look around the world, it's exactly the same story. So I'll end my input by saying a story. I directly listened to a gentleman. He's a Dutch young person, about 29 years old. So I was in a high-speed train in China. So this guy is sitting next to me, and we were just talking. And I asked him, you are 30 years old, can you tell me how is the life in Netherlands in the last 30 years? He said, Professor, my initial few years was fantastic. Now it's terrible. So I actually asked him why. He said, I look around, most of us cannot afford a house. He's not a migrant, he's a local. But he said, I cannot afford a house. So he said the cost of living has gone up, opportunities went down. That's why that resentment, Philip Altbach mentioned, there is a pushback by the nationalistic governments in Europe, rest of the world. But there's a good news. I would agree with him because he's very senior to me, but I would disagree with him because my experience is much different. Being an Indian, you are most welcome now than you being an Indian 30 years ago. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, they actually don't want you. I'm very sure about that. But now, compared to Chinese, because I just came from China, I know what's going on. Chinese were very welcome before, but right now Indians are most welcome with all the problems. China and India has, say, 1.5 billion people. So it's a time for you with all the footnotes and complications are there, but I think it's the most optimal time. Since I don't have a timer, I need to ask Prof. Verghese, did I exceed or I'm within the 8 minutes? Still in the 8 minutes, good. Already done. Okay, see, he said my time is up, so I have to adhere to me. Otherwise, he said he will not buy me a coffee after this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Sriram, for giving a futuristic orientation and also giving a picture that world is not so bleak, the future is not so bleak as we may look, as we may try to explain. So there is little silver lines in the dark cloud, you know. Thank you very much for that optimistic look. May I request Professor Sabu now?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Namaskaram. So this is the land where I grew up, and I'm so happy to be giving whatever I can. And my thanks to also the Higher Education Council and also Professor Verghese for sharing, and also my co-panelists who are here. I think it's about global perspectives. The first thing that I would like to really start by saying is that everything, whatever, when you look for a product, what do you really aim for? The quality, right? Quality is fundamental. So quality of education is paramount, and it is not just quality. So how do you reach that quality? I think there is only one way, based on my experience serving for the last 30 years at the University of Southampton, or 24 years to be specific. What I have learned is that the route to quality is actually research. So what we do is that we do what is known as the research-informed education. So research is not just confined within scholars who are really keen to do research, but it is our responsibility to bring that research component to education. Then we will realize how the standards change, how the benchmark changes is actually through that research. So it's like when you talk about research, it is the curiosity-led research. So you have to really encourage young people to think, imagine. I think we heard the word imagine several times today. Imagination is fundamental. So can we really allow our teaching methodology, whatever our engagement for young people, students to think, to pause and think, not just rush in this complex world. That is fundamental. And it is not easy to achieve that because, how do you bring in research into classroom is not easy. So for that, the teacher will have to be a researcher first. So the teacher's training, a teacher should be really, or the lecturer should really have that research qualities. It's not just publishing papers in top journals. So let's say that if you publish a paper in Science or Nature or any top journals, the first question that you should ask is that, well, that's fantastic. That is, that shows your academic kind of abilities to communicate or to innovate and communicate research and so on. That's fine. But the second question is that what difference has this made to the society? And that is fundamental. And that is where it is our moral responsibility to really train young people to think and to ask questions. Asking questions is very difficult, very, very difficult. I don't know how many of you are going to ask questions, but when you ask a question, you have to absorb what is actually shared, and then you have to really also do some analysis, inference, before you answer that question. So developing a kind of inquisitive mind, that means like asking the right questions within the classroom. So when we talked about restricting our lectures to 20 minutes, so I don't teach in my classroom anymore. I don't teach. So what I do is that I talk to students. So we talk and we try to address not just what is confined within the curriculum, but also what is going around the curriculum. So global challenges, for instance, any graduate that we are thinking of, so if we want Kerala to be really on the forefront of higher education in India and the globe, the first thing that we need to ensure is that our generation, our young people understand what is, what are the challenges that the globe face. Are these challenges confined to only different parts of the world, or are we also experiencing those? And also, I think in addition to that, solving those challenges, problem solving is actually quite important. I think problem solving is one of the areas that where we have not really invested heavily on. Because we believe in curriculum, we believe in completing a set of syllabus rather than actually encouraging young people to think and solve problems. So problem solving is very, very fundamental. And that also, once you start into that kind of area of education, then you develop what is known as critical thinking. So it's all interrelated. And I'm not saying that our colleagues here in Kerala or anywhere, the problem is actually not confined to just Kerala, but universal. Yeah, right. So the research is actually something that is the focus, and I think that we should really give high priority to. Second is that exposing our student community to the real world. So that meaning that bringing the students from overseas to Kerala so that they understand what is Kerala, what is India. So because, whatever they see, in their own world are just stereotyped ways of projecting the state, like for instance from BBC and CNN and so on. Their perspective is different. So just to really wind up, one example is that the year before, I brought a group of students to Bombay. And these are all British students who were actually victims to COVID. During COVID time, they never had any opportunity to kind of see the world. They have never traveled beyond England. So when I brought them to India, the first thing was that actually they were in a full cultural shock. They couldn't absorb certain things. One of the students even sat down on the floor saying that, I don't know, I'm seeing these many people for the first time in my life. So that is a perspective that you bring to the students. To cut that story short, the Vice Chancellor of the university asked these students at the end, what have you learned in this whole journey? They said that only one thing. So they unanimously said, this experience has taught us to become better citizens. And that is education. I think then we thought, that, our mission is fulfilled. When they said, this experience has taught us to understand the world better, and this has transformed us to become a better citizens, that is what is education. So quality, research, experience, exposure, these are fundamental aspects. Thank you.
Thank you very much for two things. One is that route to quality is research. I think that is very important statement that he's making, which can be quoted anywhere, So that is very important. Similarly, the focus on teacher competency. In higher education, unfortunately, this is not highlighted substantially. School education has training programs and other activities. But once you finish a master's degree and you enter into college, the initial understanding was that there is no need to train. Training people, orient people, or whatever be the term that one is using. So therefore, teacher competency, today I feel that many pedagogical reforms that you are talking about, or higher education reforms that you are talking about, fail in the classroom because the teacher is not prepared and the competency of the teacher is in question. So it is not that they do not have the initial inputs, but we have not given enough orientation to sharpen their intellectual capacities and translate that into teacher competencies in the classroom. Thank you very much. May I come to Dr. Sakaria now?
Thank you, sir. Truly an honor to be doing this in my home state. I grew up here, and let me use it as an icebreaker, after you, same here. And then I'm coming, when I left my home, it was minus 18. So 32 makes a big difference there. So this is from Michigan. So I'll be talking about career competencies. This morning we heard from Nina about some of those competencies. That's the 21st century competencies that the employers are looking for. One of the great things about Kerala and Malayalis is we never shy away from investing in high quality education. And the key question is, what is this high quality education and who determines that? Is it the institutions that determine, or is it the student who determines the quality of education, or the employers? I'm coming into this from a very different perspective, not from an administrative perspective, but more as a practitioner. So this key question really lends to us to think, what is the product of an institution of higher education? Or is it the outcome of the curriculum in the student? In one of the studies conducted by the Lumina Foundation, they interviewed the chief academic officers or administrators within the education, and the chief education officers believed, 96% of the chief education officers believed that the students, when they graduate from their institution, are fully prepared to be employed. However, only 11% of the prospective employers really found or stated that the graduating students were ready to be employed. So there's a huge disparity. And the question is also, what is this gap? What is a gap between 96% and the 11%? 96% education institution leadership believing that they are ready. However, on the receiving end, only 11% of the employers agreeing that they are ready. And what is the gap in the skill set is a key question that we really need to ask. We can take multiple approach in looking into this, and I really take an economic decision-making model approach, which is believing that a student makes a huge investment in higher education with the hope of a higher ROI or return on investment. If you really look at it through the lens of a graduating student, he or she would choose an institution of higher education that can better prepare him or her to be not only to be career ready, but also have employability. So the question is, what is the difference between career readiness and employability? So institutions of higher education primarily focus on preparing the students to transition from the the institution of higher education, or from the college or the university, to be employed. And the skill sets that is required for one to be career ready is similar, but not employed, to be employable or employability. So some of the skills that one requires to be career ready is critical thinking or problem solving, written and oral communication skills, teamwork, digital technology or understanding of technology, leadership skills, work ethics, career management, and global and cultural fluency. So this is broadly what the career readiness, and this is the space within which the institutions of higher education work. And one of the aspects that has not come up here, but this comes up very often in the US context, is K through 12. Yes, we can do, and I think this is very important for us to recognize, the institutions of higher education can prepare the students to be employable or can work on the employability only if the K through 12 or the school system also follows the same system, where students are then handed over so that they can be upskilling. Then the next comes employability. So once a student gets into a job, the phase of employability is, or the skills required for one to have the employability skill is to progress within that job or to progress to other tasks and other jobs. So employability leads to the progression in one's career. And broadly, the dimensions required for employability are career identity. So career identity has quite a few things, and one of the major one is one's ability to relate and associate with the task that they're doing. So that is high competency for what they are tasked to do, primary task. Personal adaptability, and this comes in with the dynamics and with the changing nature of the industry, one need to be able to adapt. And the third one is the human and social capacity. The human and social capacity is one's ability to network and build a relationship within an organization which would foster or which would lead to one's ability to move up in the career. This morning we heard about career competencies. I really want to focus not on the career competencies, but what really leads. And we also heard about knowledge, skills, and attitude. I'll just mention a few things in that and then hand over. So what is the knowledge? When we're really talking about, when we're really talking about knowledge, skills, the key is the soft skills. Yes, when thousands of students are graduating from an institution, what will make you stand out? So your knowledge, skills, and attitude should incorporate global and cultural competencies. And it is those cultural competencies and your ability to work in group is what really would lend you the ability to progress in your career. So it is very important that institutions of higher education not only focus on the hard skills, but also recognize the importance of soft skill for the employability of their students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy that you did not focus on employment, but focused on employability. As many jobs that we have today will be disappearing in the coming years. Just mentioned in the morning. If that is the case, if you talk about the skill development, the question will be asked, skill development for which job? What type of job? We may not have an answer. There is a sense of uncertainty. And also in the employment market, a trend that you find is that informalization of jobs, even in the formal sector. I'm not talking about the formal and informal sector. Even informalization of jobs, even in the formal sector. Therefore, the skills that are required are very different. But what we need to have in education is employability, means skills to pick up skills when the skills changes are becoming an important dimension. Thank you very much for that. May I request Dr. Shakila?
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you, Professor Varghese. Firstly, let me actually be grateful to Kerala State Higher Education Council for giving me an opportunity to be a part of this very esteemed panel and this very pertinent conclave that we are having at the moment. Let me also take this opportunity at the cost of reducing my 8 minutes to wish every one of you a very happy and successful new year, and also on the occasion of Makar Sankranti, Bihu, Pongal, and a number of festivals that are being celebrated today. So having said that, I am going to have a very textbookish way of going about this topic of integrating global perspectives into Kerala's higher education. I'm really trying to segmentize that into 3 parts, and I'm just trying to be very, very rudimentary in trying to help us all to understand what do we mean by integrating global perspectives. So at the very root of it is not really in terms of looking at just internationalization or student mobility, but looking at a very world view or a very comprehensive view in which we accept that education is no longer confined within local, regional, national levels. The realization comes from the fact that we are living in a very interconnected world. We are very much scientifically and technologically advanced, and both the advantages and the disadvantages of disruptive technologies, which are putting threats to the kind of jobs that we may be having, the kind of changing profiles that may be having, all lead us to look at how do we empower our students, faculty, and educational institutions in this very volatile, uncertain kind of a complex world that we are living in. So globalization, as we look at, or the idea of integrating global perspectives at a rational level, is to understand that students are equipped with what skills our panelists have spoken about. about teacher competencies being one in which we move towards outcome-based education, and we move from a teacher-centric approach to a very learner-directed approach, not in a cliche term, but in real terms, create active learning environments, and how do educational institutions, be they colleges or universities, actually give an impetus to this entire ecosystem that we are looking at. So I would say that the rationale for integrating global perspectives is not a matter of choice any longer. It's almost inevitable that we integrate it if we need to be relevant and if we need to have educational institutions which are future ready, both in terms of student capacities of knowledge, skills, and attitudes, and so on, in terms of teachers' abilities to transform them to become better human beings and better citizens. So I would say we go beyond a much reductionist view of higher education, beyond employment, to think of how we look at our institutions, students, faculty becoming really globally ready. I think that is the first rationale. Now, what does it entail? As I said, it might entail looking at a student to be a global citizen, and a global citizen working in cross-cultural environments, looking at the idea of student mobility, teacher mobility, which all try to give you a certain sense of appreciation of others. And rather than thinking of othering someone else, you think of including them within part of your mainstream. And that becomes very important in the context of what Altbach said in the morning, that you have nationalist, populist governments which are looking very, very inward. And I think there is a reason for us in academia to look at a kind of a very integrated view of the society. And Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, I thought Sriram would touch upon it, but somehow he had not touched upon it. So the SDG Goal 4, I don't have to say that, plus the target of 4.7 in higher education cannot really be realized unless we look at a global perspective of higher education. It cannot be achieved within smaller efforts. It has to be very integrated approaches. Now for you, the last part that I would like to tell is how do we actually do this? So India is a very large country, very complex, 1,200 universities, 48,000 colleges, and in the Kerala landscape we may be much lesser. But these numbers add to the complexity and the diversity of these institutions. So there is really no one-size-fits-all approach that can happen. Each institution needs to create a strategic plan, how they go about it. And some of the points that we could say is where the Honorable CM said that there is a commitment from the state and the department that they go in for integrating global perspectives. Now that is your first hurdle that is overcome, because you have the governance that is really supporting us. Then comes the institutional commitment, and the very fact that we have the Honorable Vice Chancellors of all the universities represented here is an indication of their endeavor to move towards this effort. Internationalizing curricula can be done in multiple models. It could be a talk, it could be the way you infuse international components into your curricula, or you go in for joint degrees or dual degrees, or you also have the fourth approach that is being talked about, which seems to have been completely lost in the recent past, is how do we have a social responsibility angle to global education. And that needs to come in, because if you're looking at becoming a global citizen, you need to be humanistic by nature. You need to accept the diversities that are there and yet think of it as being a very harmonious society. So I think the teacher's attitude and to move towards outcome-based education with socio-emotional capacities also becomes very critical to really make this happen. And I'm sure if we all put our efforts into it, I'm sure it's not going to be a very difficult task, because I think the commitment is there, and I think the passion with which all of us are here today resonates with that idea of integrating global perspectives in higher education and also in Kerala's higher education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting to listen to you. And I think this point that global perspective is not a matter of choice. That's a very important statement that you are making. And also the point that higher education should think beyond employment. And when we focus higher education only to employment, we have a corporate sector attitude towards higher education development, which is a very narrow perspective that we are talking about. So this point that we should look beyond employment, I am not saying that employment is not important, but we should go beyond that, and creating a global citizen and how it is necessary, and what is the role of the institutional plans to incorporate the global perspectives in the higher education development is a very, very important, and in a sense, it's a guideline. Thank you very much for that. May I request Mahmood?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great honor to be here along in front of such an esteemed audience as well as co-panelists. Thanks to the Kerala Higher Education Council as well as especially to Professor Gurukul for the invitation. I am a student of history, and therefore some of my comments are based on the background that I come from. Although my main teaching and research interests are in history, I'm also have been in conversation with my colleagues from other disciplines, especially from humanities and social sciences. Coming from history, especially Kerala has a long history of attracting students from abroad. We have historical records of students from Malaysia, Indonesia, Sri Lanka coming to study in Kerala in 16th century, 17th century, and so forth. And that long history of attracting students from abroad is somehow lost. Although in the recent 2-3 decades, as we listen in the morning, there are more students coming to the state. I have 4 points. I'll try to make it brief, emphasizing the kind of future directions that we can take while we aim for integrating global perspectives into Kerala's higher education. The first one is the South-South connections. Usually, you always have been looking at towards the northern institutions, by which I mean the Western institutions. And several speakers before me mentioned how the West is going into a decline, which is somewhat true. And we see clearly that the roads and infrastructure in several countries, like maybe in Tanzania or Indonesia, are far better than the roads in Scotland or UK, as well as infrastructure. And the universities in several European and American institutions are struggling for money, while several institutions in the global south are thriving, and they are putting a lot of investment into education. And therefore, one way forward would be, instead of looking more and more to the west, we should be looking into the more southern countries, especially in Africa and Asia, where, like, whether it's in South Africa or Japan, Korea, South Korea, or Singapore or Malaysia, all these places have fantastic, not only infrastructure, but also aspiration towards better higher education. Therefore, this emphasis on global south, as well as and the global south definitely cannot stand in its own, but also in collaboration with the global north. So south-south-north connection would be one way in which our future achievements, our future initiatives should be emphasizing. And that particularly from an Indian Ocean history that I specialize in, we have a lot of inputs. And this is also something that I see. The second point is about the particular historical repertoire available in front of us. And recently, we had a lot of digitalization of documents. And we were surprised to see the kind of similarity between the documents available from a place like Tanzania and Indonesia. Almost 30% of the documents available, digitalized documents available from Tanzania, were very similar to the 30% of the documents digitalized from Indonesia, while these two countries are thousands of miles apart. So these historical connections are provide us repertoire to sort of undertake further investigation, especially in humanities and social science, not only for historical research, but also for other areas. And that is also something I would like to emphasize, especially for my colleagues from humanities and social science background, the importance of, not only the AI, but the digital humanities per se. For last 2-3 decades, several institutions, several countries, several universities have invested heavily in digitalizing materials, and which is a great achievement. But very rarely scholars have started to explore the implications of these materials, and that also would be something. And Kerala government itself has invested a lot in digitalizing materials. But looking at the connections between these places, as well as especially between the Global South countries and Global South institutions and materials, would be something that we can explore. The final point that I would like to emphasize is the collaborative research initiatives. This is like in several humanities disciplines, it is still very at its inceptive stage, so to speak. Most of the research is basically an individual initiative. A historian does their own research without necessarily collaborating with others. But in a place like, for example, Cochin, for a period between 1500 and 1800, you have at least materials available in 15 languages. Therefore, one historian alone cannot do the research by doing justice to the kind of materials available to us. And therefore, collaborative research within the discipline, but also across the institutions, as well as the first thing that I mentioned, across the countries, especially joint PhD programs, as well as joint publications, in which institutions and individuals from both Global South as well as Global North collaborate. And these would be some of the ways in which our initiatives can invest in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. When we talk about collaborations, there is a natural tendency that we look westward, and very rarely we look to southward in terms of collaborations, whether it is a research collaboration or an industrial collaboration or technology transfer collaboration. Always our tendency is for looking westward. And I am happy that your emphasis on South-South collaborations, and also a description of the material that is already available, which is not adequately explored. And therefore the collaboration, not only in terms of spatial collaboration in terms of the academic disciplines and the branches, that is very important. Friends, I should thank my panelists that they maintained the time very well, and not because of me, but because of their own self-discipline. I can permit 2 or 3 questions. Very brief. It should be questions. It should not be too much long commentaries, Although I enjoy commentaries, but this is, given the time, I don't have permission to that. 2, tell your name, tell your institution, pose your question, and 2 or 3, please. Yes. Please, sir. There. Here. Sorry, sir, I'll come back to you. You showed your hand first, actually. Yes, please.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
We can hear you. If you can stand up, others also can see you.
So my name is Joseph Martin. I work for PricewaterhouseCoopers. My question is, I'm alluding to the points Professor Sabu and Dr. Shakila told. The purpose of education is to create a talent pool who can respond to the stimuli and then contribute to the economic and social development of whichever countries they are in. The highest risk which we are facing, according to World Economic Forum, is the misinformation risk. This misinformation risk was there for a long time. But because it is elevated, do you think any policy nudges or any curriculum nudges is required to address this risk? Because this is going to be the biggest risk in terms of the talent pool participating in the development of a country.
Okay. Thank you very much. Here.
My name is Pradeep. I teach at IIT Madras. So my question is that while our education has become global, the tools for embracing global knowledge have enhanced. Societies have become more and more inward. And this was reflected in the inaugural session as well. What are those sort of reasons why societies have become inward, and how would education protect itself?
Thank you. Thank you. If there are no further questions, I'll give, oh, sorry, last one. That, sorry, oh, I didn't see that. I have short sight problem. I don't see people.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my name is Sunil Kumar. I am from KUSAT. Yeah, you spoke about quality education and quality research to enrich education. That was the content of a couple of panelists. So my question, specific question regarding that is, what is the role of value guidance in education? You also spoke about social responsibility towards the end. But what is the role of value education in the current scenario of education globally? And what specifically can we do in value guidance upon this skill-biased education? Thank you.
Thank you. Here, Professor Sabu, last. Here.
Sir, there's one more here.
Oh, I cannot go on like that. Then the next session we...
Can I come in quickly? Yeah.
Yes.
So this is because, the automation is going very fast.
You didn't tell your name.
Oh, my name is Pavandar. I'm working in a CVG Center of Synthetic Biology and Biomanufacturing, QSAT. What I was trying to say is that given that automation is picking up very fast, what would be the, and this is coming up very in the near future, what would be the role of education in a post-work society when automation has taken over routine jobs? And at that time, will soft skills overtake the hard skills in terms of generating the jobs?
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Sabu, last question. Yes.
Sabu Thomas, Mahatma Gandhi University, Trust Party Trivandrum. My question is to Sri Ram. See, the transformation of a universe, one of the best universes in the world is something amazing. How do you manage to do it with a short period of time? And your idea of benchmarking is something very interesting. Would you please elaborate?
Thank you very much. Now I give chance to, starting from Dr. Shakila.
Okay, just 1 minute and I'll try to touch two of them. One, of course, on misinformation. We are living in a post-truth world, and I think thanks to the social media and a number of other things that flood us, this is something that I think is something like a self-discipline that we try to bring about. So institutions, when we talk about, they are made up of students and teachers and so on. So when we look at the curricula, I think there must be a certain kind of an integrity that we maintain, especially when we are living in a post-truth world. And that resonates with this whole idea that was also asked about social responsibility and value-based education, because if you are seeing a decline of many things that was once considered as significant to holding human beings together, be it violence, be it discrimination, be it many forms of things that you're seeing, even war that is happening and the need for peace that needs to come about, I think it needs to come with an understanding that it is education which elevates us to start looking beyond boundaries. And I think, therefore, it is integrating value-based education in a very, I would say, conscious manner, not seeing it as something that, okay, we all know about honesty, we all know about ethics, but making a conscious effort to see that we integrate that, and with values come in the social responsibilities. So I don't see it is not doable. I think these are all doable if we put our hearts and minds into it.
I think just quickly, I believe that industry engagement is very crucial for our young people to understand the real problems. And also, as I mentioned earlier, I'm repeating that, I think a clear understanding of global challenges is very much needed in our society. Because, I really question the big leaders of our world today. They are absolutely in a terrible situation, being unable to make decisions even. So decision making, from that skill to understanding the needs of their own country and the value of being interconnected in this world, the interdependence in this world. So I was at, just one quick example that I need to give you is, I'm advisor to the government of Oman. So I was there, actually asked a question about food insecurity to planners. And their response was actually, no, we don't have that problem. We have enough food. They forget the fact that 80% of their food is imported. So if there is a flood in Haryana or in Lahore in Pakistan or in Thailand, then they are, it's not going to, the country is not going to function. So in that kind of knowledge is very much required. And the industries like, industries and leading institutions should come forward with a radical policy to influence the young minds. And for which I think, we have technology. Today, we can very easily connect PricewaterhouseCoopers to an institution in Kusat. Very easy. We can easily bring, so if you bring one expert from a world to a classroom for 1 minute, that'll make a difference. Because the students will remember that experience. So use the technology as much as we can, as well as, these forums should really lead to outcomes, tangible outcomes and productive outcomes. Thank you.
I'll just refer to the value and misinformation. I think it's very important that the classrooms now needs to be a platform for open conversations where we need to be very cognizant of the formal, informal, and the invisible curriculum. This is something that we never pay much attention. That is the bias of the faculty itself. The faculty also need to be equipped where they can facilitate conversations where they're not talking at each other, the students or the faculty, but they're talking to each other, whereby they can acknowledge that being different is okay. And what makes us better is the difference within us and among us.
Okay, I think my question, pointed one, is about benchmarking. I will answer that directly. Benchmarking involves faculty members' quality and research outcome and impact. Second aspect is how we teach the students and the quality of coursework and outcomes of the students. And then third one is infrastructure. Is it world class? So these are the three things. It's coming to other questions is misinformation. I really agree with you. The world is suffering from misinformation and fraudulent information, for sure. The only way to handle this is we have to, maybe I explain. All our students in NUS, they use regenerative AI, submit their assignments. It's very difficult for us to really assess them. They all look very similar. So the only way you can do is to make sure they become a critical thinkers and deep thinkers. Otherwise, the whole generation will be lost. And that applies to everyone else in the society. Coming to inward minds, why is that happening is globalization basically opened up everything for everyone. So that exposed intense competition that naturally brings insecurity. It's the human nature. When you are exposed to insecurity, you have that flight syndrome and you go towards inward thinking. And politicians naturally support people to just give them a feeling of taking care. So that's why all the nations are going towards that. I know he doesn't want me to take too much time, but I want to make sure. Nina from the World Bank is saying, I'm watching you. She sent me a message on WhatsApp, so I must answer everything. The value guidance, Shakila actually, I was saying in her message, I was hoping you talk about sustainable development goals. We wrote a report recently, a UNESCO report, which talks about this. So to bring value guidance, essentially we have to talk about, in every subject, every discipline, about 17 sustainable development goals. We have a report which is 120 pages, you can download it. It tells you how it should be done while you leverage global knowledge as well as indigenous knowledge. And the last question is automation. Does that mean we have less importance for hard skills, more importance for the soft skills? Answer is no. Even if it is highly automated, you still need a high quality hard skills if you want to really have a future generation systems. You have to be at the forefront. But it's true for most people that are leveraging automation, human machine interfaces, they might just get away with soft skills. They can speak well, like the way I'm speaking to you. I can just get away with speaking nicely, smiling at you. You probably think he's a good panelist. While Professor Varghese thinks he must be the lousiest panelist I have here. Thank you.
All right, I'll try to be very brief, especially maybe taking this one question on automation. And I would say I'm very positive the kind of possibilities that automation would bring to humanities and social sciences particularly. And many traditional disciplines such as whether philology, linguistics, or even history or epigraphy, automation helps quite drastically to lessen the burden for the research that a person has to conduct. I'll give you a quick example. I remember going to the Dutch National Archives and trying to read 17th century Dutch paleography related to one port town in Kerala, Ponnani. And even to figure out one word, it would take at least 2-3 minutes. And one page would require a day in order to read. Now, thanks to the great initiative by the Dutch government and the Dutch National Archives, all these are, machine readable. Therefore, now I can actually do the research instead of spending time trying to figure out the paleography. And the same goes for many other disciplines. And therefore, I think the automation helps quite dramatically or quite drastically for many disciplines. And it is our task to make better use of the possibilities the automation and the AI and other tools provides us.
Friends, as you can imagine, with 5 people on the panel, it was not an easy task to complete this on time. And I don't want to make a sexist remark, So let me refrain from that, So it was really interesting that we had different perspectives and viewpoints that is expressed. I think one major point that is coming out from this is that if you want to change the higher education system, we have to think globally and act locally, in the sense that the institutional plans which Dr. Shakila made, the institutional plans should reflect an international perspective. That will make a change, because it is questioned that whether the universities will exist. When this question was posed to a Harvard professor, his answer was that universities will exist, but not the way that we know them today. And if you are not that, the universities will not exist. Universities have to change. And Professor Altebach has written long back in 1960s or 70s, I don't remember, it is one of the most fossilized institutions in the world which refuses to change. I will add only one sentence. It propagates change in other institutions without changing within their own institution. This is also a quality that the higher education institutions have. So therefore, if you want to change institutions, the pressure should come from within. And that is where the institutional plan and the long-term perspective. And it is also important that employment is very important for graduates, for politicians, but higher education should think beyond employment. And we should talk more in terms of employability rather than employment, Friends, we come to an end. I was not trying to conclude or make any drastic conclusions about this, but these are some of the trends which are inherent, which are hidden in the open discussions that we had. Thank you very much. Now it is working.
Thus, the first plenary session on integrating global perspectives in Kerala's higher education has concluded. Thank you, Professor N.V. Varghese, as well as the panelists, Professor Sriram Ramakrishna, Professor Sabu Thomas, Dr. Zakaria Matthew, Dr. Shakila T. Shamsu, and Dr. Mohammed Kuria for making this session vibrant. Thank you, audience, also for your active participation. Thank you.
technologies in transforming the higher education landscape. The speakers shall deliberate upon the integration of AI-powered solutions for personalized learning experiences, smart assessment patterns, and enhanced administrative efficiency across the universities and colleges. Participants will gain deep insights into leveraging these modern technologies for maximizing student engagement, optimal resource utilization, and implementing real-time feedback mechanisms. Moderator of this session is Professor Saji Gopinath, former Vice Chancellor, Digital University of Kerala, and Professor, Indian Institute of Management, Kozhikode. As the speakers of this session, we have Professor Don Passe, Professor of Technology Enhanced Learning, Lancaster University, Dr. Stephen Vincent, Senior Analyst and Head of Division at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Paris, Dr. Rajeshri MS, CEO and Trust Research Park, and former Vice Chancellor, APJ Abdul Kalam Technological University. And we have Professor Neeta Inamdar, Symbiosis International Deemed University, Pune. I welcome the moderator as well as the panelists. And I cordially invite Professor Saji Gopinath to moderate this session.
Good afternoon and welcome to the second panel. We have a very important topic which is very close to us, because I'm sure that we all know that the way the AI and generative AI especially is actually making the great impact in various sectors, various parts of our life, and especially in higher education. So we know that in fact, the theme when we spoke about saying that it is a revolution. So I believe that maybe we need to start looking at that, whether there is going to be a revolutionary change. Is there going to be a fundamental paradigm shift which is happening because of the generative AI and maybe AGI, which is coming in maybe in very recent future itself. So in this particular session, I believe that we are primarily going into the details of this, because of all the sectors where the AI is making impact, perhaps one of the sector which is going to get deeply impacted is going to be the higher education sector. We know that when different models of industrial revolutions happened in the past, we have seen the type of changes which is happening in and around us. Because of the earlier verses of the industrial revolution, quite a bit of physical labor has been automated. Now we today speaking about AI and generative AI and other digital technologies are going to automate quite a bit of cognitive work. This is going to be a big challenge, because that is an area where the higher education sector is actually working. So primarily, I believe that we need to look at in this session 2 or 3 aspects of this whole gamut, and we have very eminent panelists who are here who will be deliberating on this topic. The first thing which we need to look at is what are those challenges which is and the requirements higher education sector is being faced with when we are actually looking at the generative AI and the other emerging technologies which is coming into front of us. In fact, the morning session we discussed about the type of new skills and the 21st century skills which has to be given, and living with AI or mastering the AI is going to be a key element for all the future generations per se. So how do we actually transform our education system to address that challenge? Could be one of the areas which we will be discussing in this panel. The second thing is, we also know that the time in which this technology has been adopted, thanks to the new business models, is very, very short. In a very short period of time, the technology, especially Gen AI technology, has come to us. And when AGI comes, it may even be faster. But when some technology comes such a fast manner to change our lives, there will be a lot of challenges coming along with that. Could be ethical challenges, could be privacy challenges, regulations are not kept up with the time. So how do we actually look at it? Plus, there is quite a bit of a need for deep research in the type of technology, social and other aspects which are changing along with that. I'm sure that this is an area which higher education sector has to take up immediately as a priority as such. The third and perhaps the most important thing is taking from the last session where we spoke about whether institutions have to transform. The teaching and learning process requires a transformation in the new world. And because the technology can be looked at something which just accelerate, or it actually can provide a completely different perspective. We know that AI, if applied properly, can provide quite a bit of a precision learning aspects per se. You can actually look at individuals' learning paradigms per se. How do we actually make our teaching learning processes reoriented, rediscovered in this process? And that could be the third element. And along with that, since there are few education administrators here, I'm sure that we can also look at how AI is actually getting applied from an administrative point of view, automating many of the simple functions, or administrative functions, so that we can actually focus on what universities and organizations have to be looking at their core purpose of why they exist as such. And that is the context in which we will be discussing this session. Again, we also have a very limited time, and we have 4 eminent speakers. So I have requested all the speakers to limit their talks to 10 minutes, so that we will have at least around 15 minutes for the discussions with the audience per se. So with that brief introduction, let me invite our first panelist, Professor to take up your first session as such. Yes. Slides. You want to use the podium, or you? No, yeah. Do you have a clicker?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
Change the slide with this.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, just to say that I'm very honored to be asked to come to the Conclave, and I'm very happy to be able to talk about topics that are very dear to me and of concern to me. I should say that these were the points that were requested that we cover, and I'll try and cover some of those within the next probably 9.5 minutes. A little background about me, just to say that I don't come, although I'm a professor of technology enhanced learning, I don't come from a technology background particularly. I come from an educational background, and therefore I'm concerned with education. I'm concerned with teaching and learning. I'm concerned with how people use technologies to benefit teaching and to benefit learning. And I'm interested in emerging technologies, how we continue to take on board the technologies that I've been looking at for some 35 years. And I've seen some come, and I've seen some go. And I'm sure that that's going to continue to be the case for the next 35 years. Just to say that it's interesting that in the AI field, and I'm talking here more about generative AI than AI, because AI has actually been around for a long, long time. But in the generative AI field, there tend to be two quite polar views about it. It tends to be thought of as either something which is very beneficial or something which is causing great concern for the future. Now that's particularly interesting. It indicates that there's not at the moment a really balanced view of what happens, of what is happening, what can happen, and what should happen. That means that we don't really understand what is happening, I would suggest. We don't have enough research knowledge about the field to understand what it is that we're looking at and where we are going with it. And that is of particular interest to me, and I think should be of particular interest to anyone who is exploring this field of generative AI, that we need research in this area, and we need fundamental research if we're going to move forward positively with it. I think that those who advocate for the uses of generative AI are often advocating on the understanding of time savings. But one question I would ask is that always the case? Is our use of generative AI always helping with time savings? I think I could probably find a few examples where I would say it hasn't helped. So again, we're in a situation where we don't fully understand how we can use these systems to get the best out of them. Also, I would say that those who advocate can be critical of their uses. They can see the benefits that come out of them for them, and then they pass that on to others. And that criticality, to me, is particularly important. Critical thinking and criticality seem to me to be fundamental if we are to continue to use generative AI in the future. And I would say that for anyone who is using generative AI, we need to ensure that critical thinking and criticality of skills is there at the same time. We need to build that. And I don't actually think that that's just down to higher education. I think that's actually down to society. I think it's because generative AI is something which is affecting all of us as citizens, and it's also affecting young people before they enter higher education. But I still believe that criticality and critical thinking are fundamental if we're going to move forward successfully with generative AI systems. I think that AI-powered solutions do, however, provide personalized experiences. They can do that. But the assumption is that it can benefit all learners or all teachers. I'm not actually convinced by that yet. And I think that there is some evidence, and there are some statements being made, that actually generative AI systems at the moment are not being as inclusive as they could be. And this is actually relatively typical of technology systems that are developed. Technology systems are often developed for the widest audience, but they don't necessarily take on board all of those who can be included. So, for example, there are statements currently that those who are visually impaired are not supported by generative AI systems as well as those who don't have those difficulties. So again, these are developments that need to be considered for the future if we are to be fully inclusive with regard to the use of generative AI systems in education for all of our learners and for all of our teachers, I would say. I do see chatbots, use of chatbots being developed within higher education quite extensively actually at the moment. I see this internationally, particularly for student engagement when it comes to administration, support, and inclusion systems. So I think that there is a case to look at what is happening here elsewhere across a wider university range. I would say that there's a need always, if we're to move to the use of generative AI systems, if we will need to move to more virtual and online systems. That means that there's a need for a strong underpinning infrastructure. One question I would say that always should be there is, do we have that? Now, I've been in Kerala for a few days, and actually I've experienced what I would say is quite a strong, wide mobile network system. So it seems to me that there are elements of infrastructure that are there, but they also need to be there in terms of the networking, they need to be there in terms of the hardware and the software that's going to be developed if virtual and online systems are to be used in terms of generative AI. There are ethical concerns, and I'm not going to focus on this because I know that another one of our speakers is going to focus on that particularly. But just to say that AI depends upon three fundamental elements as far as I can see. It depends upon a data system. It depends upon the way that the questions that are asked of it are then asked through that system. And it depends upon how the answer is presented. Now, for ethical concerns, it seems to me that there are ethical concerns in each of those. To what extent do users actually agree or not to their use of the system then being incorporated into the background data? To what extent do they agree to the use of their questions being used again within the system? And again, should the output be critically concerned? And are we being ethical enough about the critical concerns of the questioning of the outputs? In terms of engagement and feedback, I do see that there are benefits. Benefits are being seen by some teachers and by some learners. Certainly, for example, specific feedback with help with language learning is reported in the literature relatively commonly. But there are concerns and questions, and I do know that there are concerns and questions being raised by students in higher education already, and those are to do with things like misrepresentation, incorrect output, misleading information. For me, it all now comes down to one thing, that to maintain and ensure human criticality is going to be important, paramount, if we're going to be successful with AI-powered systems. And I suppose I would say that for those who are on the non-advocacy end of talking about generative AI systems, I would say if there is a terrible concern about the future, the generative AI systems depend upon power. Should we always be able to turn them off if we need to? And at that point, I'll stop.
Thank you. I think the issue of inclusivity is actually a very important element. I think we'll discuss this in much more detail later. So let me invite Professor Rajeshri for her presentation.
Good afternoon, distinguished panelists and esteemed audience. I will stop at where Professor Don Passe stopped. I'll start from there. All of us know that technology has been extensively used in higher education, and the advances are very profound influence on higher education. So primary use of technology is to introduce more effective student engagement models and for easing administrative tasks. So from my point of view, I have been using it as an educational administrator, and in this session I will be looking at it from the point of view as a computer science student, where it is extensively being used. The use cases are already being pointed out by Professor Passe, and we will refine those applications and see what are the opportunities and threats around it. So we can, especially when it comes to generative AI, we can say that it is one of the technological breakthroughs of this decade, or this generation at least so far. Because we have been using programming and analytical models for education, especially STEM education, where we used to deal with deterministic systems. We know, given this output, what the output is going to be. But it is quite different when it comes to Gen AI systems, where the systems will be producing output at some point, and we don't know what exactly is happening in the models that are getting trained. And there exactly lies the threat when we are using Gen AI as companions for teaching, learning, and assessment. One of the important case studies that is available is the NSF Institute of Artificial Intelligence and Fundamental Interactions at MIT, where Professor Jesse Taylor was using this extensive GAI, especially for physical sciences teaching. He's a theoretical physicist, and it was extensively being used for teaching theoretical physics. And it is stated that the way students do education and the way researchers do research has been extensively changed by the models that have been created, because it is not just integrating GAI models into the knowledge area of physics, but it is organic linkage of AI into the subject of physics. So that is exactly the point I am trying to drive in. When as teachers we use generative AI models, it is not that we are using a system that is already in place, a model that is existing, but it is integrating organically the area that we are pursuing into the generative AI model to get the desired results. That means schools can use AI models for effective teaching and learning only if this principle is employed. Otherwise, we don't know what exactly happens in these black boxes and all the threats that Professor Passe was pointing out, the threat of bias, the threat of misinformation, everything can come there. So that is where we as educators, we as teachers need to intervene and analyze and research this technology for our uses. For looking Kerala's education ahead, we can think of educational technology research centers with some good AI schools or AI centers of excellence and see how we can use specific, how we can create specific verticals for each of the subject area teaching, coming up with good models of generative AI. So in Professor Taylor's approach, he has even found that using learning quantum physics and statistics mechanics, it need not be through calculus alone, but it might be easier to understand through the lens of probability and statistics, which forms the fundamentals of this GAI models. So there lies an opportunity if we organically understand the concept of how these models are built, it will be very useful to use. So, not only that GAI is used for STEM education, for language education also it is extensively used for in AI-powered translators, especially when second languages are learned, these can form very good translators and as a writing tutor. But when the systems are used as writing tutors, we have to see that the students are not compromising their writing and creative thinking skills, but it is only used as a tool to make these two skills better than what it used to be. But there are applications where it is used that way when students are asked to prepare their first draft and then look at it critically by advisors and then they look at the second draft and so on. Then the draft that's given by GAI systems are compared with the original draft that students write, and thus it can be used for humanities and social sciences education also. For management education also, this is used very extensively, especially chatbots in interviews and also in playing roles, like if you are the manager of such and such a company, what are you going to do? And then the cases will be written and then this can be, this can be analyzed and found out. So what we see here is that across knowledge boundaries and across barriers of disciplines, generative AI can be used in a very, very fruitful way, provided the instructors clearly understand why the tool is, why the tool is, not how the tool is used, why the tool is used, where we will have to look at our objectives and outcomes of education. So most of the objectives and outcomes of education which we have defined for the pre-AI and pre-GAI era have to be rewritten for the GAI era before we employ any of these chatbots blindly into the systems. That is how I look at it. And there is, do I have time? So then there's also another interesting research that is going on at Alan Turing Research Institute and Data Science and Artificial Intelligence at Alan Turing Institute, where it was actually called for evidence from Department of Education for their views on use of artificial intelligence in school education, and these inputs were given to the researchers at the institute, and they responded to these inputs, which has come out as, which is outlined in a very good document that raises many concerns and opportunities when GAI is used for education in school. So when we think of higher education, we need to first see how ethically and responsibility AI can be imparted in school education. Then only it will be a continuous effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rajashri. I think you made a very important point on the explainable AI and need for adopting explainable AI when we are looking at adopting it in an ethical manner per se. So we have next panel expert is Professor Stephen Vincent. So over to you.
Thank you very much. So I'm actually going to continue on what Dr. Rajastri just said and try to highlight a few more use cases on how AI systems and generative AI in general can be used actually. So it's coming. So a lot of the things I'm going to talk about are based on the OECD Digital Education Outlook that we've published in 21 and 23 and on what we're working on right now, which is basically specifically focused on generative AI. So you can find them on our website if you're interested. I'm trying to make this move, but And so here we go. So, that's what we have. So I'm going to talk about different types of generative AI and how they can actually improve teaching and learning when they are student-facing, when they are teacher-facing, and then actually how they can be used for administrative purposes. So there are a lot of different types of applications, and I don't have time to go through them, but I will just pick a few and showcase a little bit of the emerging evidence that we have on the use on generative AI in particular. So if we start with non-generative AI, we have a lot of applications that we've already spoken about. Probably the most common one are these adaptive learning systems, which help to personalize learning to what students know, and which can be used at all levels of education. In higher ed, we have a lot of things related, for example, to logic, language learning, mathematics, statistics, etc. And for mainly introductory courses, because they are the ones that are easier for which to build these kind of systems. But if we think about inclusivity, and which is one of Kerala's strong focus, some of these tools actually help to reduce the gap between students who start with less proficiency and more, but also actually make things inclusive for students with special needs or specific needs, and with that AI that is actually included in most of our smartphones, speech to text, text to speech, etc. If we come to generative AI, one thing that is very peculiar with it is that, actually it looks like students use them everywhere. And actually, when you ask faculty members whether the students use it, they actually tend to declare that, oh yeah, they use it way more than what they say they do. And so, this is something that is there. It's difficult to stop it, contrary to the kind of AI I've shown you before, because the previous ones are provided by the institutions. Generative AI is there, so that it may not happen in class, but it will happen at some point. It opens a lot of new possibilities that have actually been shown before, for learning, brainstorming with the machine, giving feedback, translating, etc. And so I'm not going to get back to that, but I'm going to highlight two examples of, what it can do. So one is actually we've talked about the importance of innovation, of having 21st century skills, and creativity and communication are some of these skills. And here that's an experiment which actually asks to write an original study and with 3 different possible conditions. So either you have no access to AI and you do it by yourself, or you can actually ask generative AI to give you the first sentence, one idea, or you can ask the generative AI to give you 5 times the first sentence, so you have this kind. And then you have to write the story by yourself, and you're evaluated by human raters. And so what do they find? Basically, they find that, if you have the generative AI, you do better than if you're by yourself. By yourself is the horizontal line. And if you have just one idea, you do not as well as if you have 5 ideas. And so people find that actually your story at the end is more creative than if you didn't have it. They also judge a lot of different things, and they find that it's better written, that it's more enjoyable. The only thing they find, but it's very small margin, is that it's not as funny as when it's the human beings. However, what they find as well is that those stories have a higher similarity with a generative AI, starting from same venture, and also that they look much more alike, to one another, and so that in fact perhaps the increase in individual creativity comes at a cost in terms of collective originality and the variety of the things that are being generated. Second example is basically how it's a writing task, and it's actually showing how people cooperate with an AI when they write an essay. And here we have 4 different types of conditions. One is, again, the human alone, and that's a control. And then you have interactions with either a human expert, generative AI, or checklist. And basically, you have to write the first draft of the essay, and then you can revise it with all these different possibilities. So you have 2 different phases in the task, and that's what's done at the higher education level. So what it shows actually is that learning motivation is more or less the same, so there is no significant differences across the different groups in terms of how motivated they feel by the task, except that those doing it by themselves actually are slightly less motivated, so that, it shows the importance of the interaction even with actually some machine, to get more engaged. The performance on the task, so the final quality of the essays is better when it was done with the generative AI, when it was revised with the generative AI, and so it leads to higher scores. However, there is no actually improvement in the knowledge that has been gained, so that you have better performance, but the knowledge, which is stated separately, remains the same, so that it doesn't translate into improved knowledge. And in terms of processes, it also finds that those using the AI actually are totally dependent on the AI interaction and do not have as much metacognitive processes in terms of thinking than the other ones. So that's why, the authors talk about metacognitive laziness, is that you don't engage in the same ways when you actually use these kind of processes. So, a lot of potential, but a little bit of risk as well, in terms of what we consider usually as learning. Second type of, tools are the teacher-facing, and, there are a lot of tools for classroom orchestration, as they say, the people who work on that, and basically how you use generative AI to do different things in your class, for example, in a big room like that, how you can actually use AI to time the task that you have, so that's what our chair could do. But also, of course, how long people are talking, then you can actually also get feedback on what you have been doing as a lecturer when you're in a group, which is always a question. In fact, when you ask teachers how much they speak, they always underestimate very much how much they speak and always think that the students have spoken a lot and they were very interactive. So there are some ways of doing it in a more automatic way. Now, if you think of generative AI, we can think of it also as a way to leverage the quality of the teaching. And so here, that's another intervention, and actually that's the strongest one that and the last one that I'm going to show you on that, which is basically, how large language model has been trained based on the effective feedback of teachers that has been observed, and then turned into an aid for inexperienced tutors in an online platform, so that's something that was done at Stanford, and what it shows is basically that the randomized control trial shows that for the tutors who were not as good, lower quality rating or medium, actually using the generative AI brings them almost at the same level as actually the good teachers, which don't gain by using it, So for them, it doesn't make any difference, but if you're not as good, it actually makes a difference. And why? Because they use actually more effective strategies of tutoring than before. So I think that's a good promise to actually leverage a lot of, workforce and to support them in actually providing a quality education in many cases. That's a school study, but I think it can generalize to some extent to the higher education sector as well. Finally, one of the things you've introduced in India is actually, the tracking of individual students, longitudinal data information system. That's really something which is very important and which can also be equipped with AI tools, so that you can follow and make sure that students don't drop out, that they complete their higher education. As you know, in many countries, enrollment is a problem, but actually completion is even more of a problem than enrollment is. And so you can actually have predictive models to see to what extent, students are doing as you would expect them to do, etc. And with generative AI, you can even actually try to leverage these data in a different way. We know that not everyone is comfortable with data, and here that's an example which not everyone liked, but on how to generate a comic interpreting some of the data that, have been gathered in the system. So to finish, all this evidence shows that there are a lot of promises. It's very limited evidence so far, it's not always very strong, but, there are some possibilities. It also shows there are a lot of challenges. And here I'm focused on the positive side of the story. In our reports, we also go through data protection, privacy, algorithmic bias, etc., etc. So that there are a lot of challenges, and we don't believe that they don't exist. And actually, you even have a learning challenge if really people don't acquire the knowledge as they did before. At the same time, I think that some of the big challenges, and especially in a place like Kerala, is also another type of bias that we don't speak about. It's a lot of the generative AI is based on the internet, and the internet is overwhelmingly dominated by English-speaking materials and culture in some ways, and so in some areas it doesn't matter. In others, perhaps actually, that's a question on how to try to counterbalance that for you. Second point is really around social acceptance. We have, we had this question of sociology before, and how do we make people accept it, and how do we find models that actually make it relevant for everyone and adapt it to all these different contexts? And so I will stop there, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Interesting research. I believe that if you do the same thing for higher education, we may get similar results. Over to you, Sangeeta.
So good afternoon, everyone. In 2011, Sweden decided to leave behind the printed books and moved completely to computers in school education. After 15 years, in 2014, they have come back and they are investing 104 million euros to bring back the printed books instead of the computers. So what does it say? It says how and why the human intervention was important and was realized to be important, and it was based on a scientific observation made by the authorities that the learning was impaired, the cognitive abilities of the students were not the same as they were earlier, and then their creative abilities got affected. And there is a very strong reason why they decided to bring back the printed books. So Dr. Prosapasi talked about these very polarized views on use of technology. So I think I'm on one side of that continuum, where I do see this technology with a lot of suspicion. I do not deny the ability of this technology to transform education, transform lives of people involved. I use my technology too. And however, there's a need for a caution, there's need for a philosophical critique of the technology intervention in education and in human lives in general. So are we really leaving it all to machines? Is it going to dehumanize higher education, education in general? Because technology is coming into not only in school, not only in higher education. In fact, coding is being taught to 7 or 8-year-old children in India. It sounds a little, it baffles me a little the way we are integrating too much of technology in education. Maybe we can pick it up and we have a debate over it later, but it is something of a matter of concern. He just spoke about metacognitive laziness. Laziness is still an ability, is still a non-willingness of an individual to engage in a creative or a cognitive enterprise. What happens if that laziness gets displaced by inability? And that is possible. The overuse of technology definitely over a period of can have an impact on the cognitive and the creative abilities of individuals. And I would compare it, the kind of disruption that AI is bringing today is something that I can compare with what probably would have happened when Gutenberg's movable types came in. Probably a similar kind of a conference or a discussion as to how it's going to change everything for the world. It did change. The entire way of teaching, learning, the emphasis at one time, especially in a country like India, which was so very much focused on learning, which was based on memory, and people had elephantine memory, and was focused on those things. They could recollect at anything that they would have studied for years and years of work on it, and how that was replaced by the movable type, and how over a period of time, and that has been happening with every single development in technology. When the computers came, when the internet came. So step by step, the brain, the ability of the human brain is, I think, curtailed, is affected. It is less used than it is before. And if this would continue, maybe, as you said, that's dooms, sayers about technology. I'm not saying that. Of course, I do see there is multiple ways in which it is also aiding human life, particularly when it comes to health technology, and also in aiding research in multiple ways. But still, I think it's time to take a pause. I'm not saying a complete no to technology, but it's time to pause, think, rationalize where we would like to place it. And when we're looking at this, it's also a question of making it culturally sensitive. One major problem with this technology is that it doesn't, most of it is only happening in one language. What happens to the rest of the languages? What happens to the cultural needs? Teaching, learning has always been context driven. And what happens to those contexts? Are we going to leave them behind completely? So if not, even when it comes to regulating AI, of course there is a lot of, I'm more interested in the policy making regarding AI and how generative AI, people are trying to control or have a regulation about it. Even this, there is a race to regulation more than the race to AI. And in fact, European Union almost won this race by coming out with an act on AI, which talks about, but it is completely culturally determined. Does it take into account the digital divide that we are facing within the country? People do not have access to devices. People do not have access to internet. And we are talking about AI. And what happens is, if we continue with this, it's going to perpetuate that divide more, and in fact even amplify over a period of time. So if at all we need to regulate AI within India, then we need to take the context into picture and then come out with a regulation that can make it as a part of our teaching learning methods, but not so much that it can dehumanize the entire education system. So I just leave you with these thoughts, and maybe more when we take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you put the other side, and I'm sure that this has created a lot of interest, and there will be a lot of questions regarding that. So thank all the panelists for keeping up the time. We have around 10 more minutes. So let's take maybe 3 or 4 questions, and then before the conclusion. So any questions? Yeah.
Sabu Thomas, Mahatma Gandhi University and Trust Research Park. My question is to Professor Passe. People always complain that AI can diminish social skills, interpersonal development, and critical thinking. At the same time, my colleague in Paris, he does a lot of AI, generative AI, to design new drug molecules of desired structure and properties. So could you comment on that? AI, people always complain AI can destroy your critical thinking abilities.
Okay. Yep. Thanks for your question. What I haven't done within this time, of course, is to talk about how AI and generative AI may be applied within different sort of subject or topic areas. And as has been mentioned, already, the impact that it is having within the health area, for example, is currently very strong. And that is a strong prospect. So I think that what I'm talking about is this general idea of education. One thing that I would say is that, of course, we are different, and some individuals actually benefit, for example, from virtual and online learning, whereas others don't. So one of the things that I think we will need to do in the future is to explore these possibilities of difference and how and whether we can accommodate them, and how we might do that at a contextual level. It may not be something that can be done from a general policy. I do know, for example, that there is one country that I'm aware of where they are indicating that a certain percentage of certain courses should be virtually taught. Now, how useful is that in the context in which it's going to happen? Can it happen? Is it going to benefit all of those students, or is it not? So I think there's a lot of exploration that needs to be done here with regard to how we can apply digital technologies as a whole, as well as generative AI, to particular individuals to support them, rather than thinking of it as something which can be applied as a general policy.
My name is Jidin, and I'm one of the student of Department of Computer Applications, CUSAT. So as we all know, we are only at the beginning phase of this huge technology called artificial intelligence, and it has already been making a huge impact and progress in every field, as we know. So I am particularly concerned about a point where it could control humanity, and it could surpass our ability to govern them and control them. So my question is that what are the ethical considerations that we need to take in order to make sure that it could evolve in a way that could align with human values, rather than evolving in a way that it could surpass our ability to controlling them? And the question that in short is that, are we humans going to be the second most intelligent persons on the earth?
You want to take?
So the first question is concerning the ethical concerns. So when we look at the ethical concerns, one important thing that comes up is the privacy of data. So when we use such systems which are used for some specific purposes, there should be some policies in the beginning, which is like person identifiable data, very specific to individuals, should not be revealed. And these are some of the policies that we have to take upfront when such systems are used. And also controlling the misinformation, which was also discussed in the previous session, which is going to make huge impact on higher education across nations and everything. So how the system is designed to be insulated from these aspects, like protection of data, then privacy of personal data, and also the misinformation. These are all some of the aspects that we need to consider when we look at ethics. So it is not a question of making something more intelligent than human beings, but it is, it is like, see, some of the things which we are not able to do, or which the machines will be able to do better than us. Maybe do a large number of computations to come up with some results, which is designing a new drug or something, where machines will perform better than humans. You can go for machines. But when it comes to decision making, where humans have to intervene, then humans have to be there in place. So that is the way we should design systems for making use of generative AI. That is my feeling.
So if I can add, so the take at the OECD and in many international organizations is also to have an AI which is a human-centric, but on the general AI, intelligence, general artificial intelligence, I think we're very far from that, and you're a student, you can code, you can cook, You can do a lot of things that an AI system cannot do. Right now, we have a lot of systems that actually can do a lot of very specific things, like a calculator can calculate much better than me, and R can do a lot of things that I cannot do at the same pace, but we are still really outperforming any kind of AI that actually exists right now in terms of general intelligence.
Thank you. One last question.
I'm Dr. Biju Evi. I'm from the University of Kerala. I have a question to Professor Nita Inamdar and Professor Don Passe. So my question is about the ChatGPT's rationality and the real rationality. Are they different? And there is a ChatGPT create some international rationality which is different from the regional rationality. So what is the differences between this? What will be the future of the global learning if this is scenario will moving like this? And as critically pointed out, it creates some people with lack of critical thinking, human without rational emotions and all. What are the implications of this? Right, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, thanks for your question. I think that in the future there is going to be this concern that digital systems and generative AI systems could become more intelligent. I think that begs the question that actually the outputs of those systems appears to be more intelligent. It seems to me that the outputs are not going to be questioned. In other words, we have to retain the ability to be able to continue to question. We've heard this a number of times this morning, as well as this afternoon, that one of the things that we as humans are able to do is to question and to look at the answers to questions and how we move forward with that. And I think that that's going to be very, very important. Whatever happens in terms of those systems, it's going to be dependent upon the data that is underpinning those particular systems. And at the moment, there are systems that are certainly biased by the forms of data that are underpinning those systems, because they don't provide a balanced view. They provide misinformation or misleading information. So I think we have to retain those abilities to question. And that's important in terms of development, and it's important in terms of those who are managing those systems, developing those systems, and regulating those systems. And for me, that's a very, very important role that governments need to play in the future. We have to have systems in place where we can depend upon the ways in which that regulation is happening. I'm not sure if I've answered your question wholly, but I've tried there. I can talk later to you individually if that would help.
You want to add?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I'm very happy younger scholars are questioning the very rationality of using it, and at the global level also, at the very local, regional level, what you just said. So for me, that's something, a larger question. What you asked is a larger question, because the entire university, in the earlier panel, you talked about how the third mission of the university, of course, the first is teaching and research, and third, generally it's called the third mission, which is about serving the community around, working with the community around. And that would need some kind of a sensitivity and also an understanding of the community around that I feel the humans can do much better than the machine. So this, I think, is something we need to understand that, and to keep ourselves relevant as a university. I mean, earlier also it was discussed. I mean, otherwise you universities get fossilized, as Professor Varghese mentioned, quoting Professor Altbach. So, and to keep that third mission, if it is important to a university, then engaging with the community around, and therefore, even when it comes to having the cultural context of AI regulations understood and implemented properly becomes something very significant to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think since we have limited time, we are closing. I think all of us agree that this technology is something which we cannot ignore, and it is going to make transformational changes in our organizations. But along with that, as we have discussed, we have issues of ethics, we have issues of bias, etc. But I think as higher education practitioners, we should also ask this question that why did bias came in the first place? Because at least in the case of Gen AI, we are not speaking about AGI, we are speaking about Gen AI, it's actually based upon the existing data and existing patterns. So if the world is already been biased, world is already have these sort of changes, issues, that is basically being put in a much larger magnitude by the technology. So perhaps we need to go back to the roots and start correcting it. But that may be the role the higher education institutions have to play. I think with that, I will once again thank my panelists for keeping up with the time for a very vibrant discussion. Thank you very much.
And now we shall have the third plenary session on fostering research excellence and innovation.
How Kerala can leverage its strengths to launch globally impactful science and innovation initiatives by adopting successful global models such as research clusters, science and technology parks, and innovation hubs. Kerala can enhance its role in scientific discoveries while maintaining international competitiveness. The session will also showcase Kerala's capacity to address major global challenges including climatic change, sustainable development, and healthcare through research initiatives rooted in a local context. Moderator of the session is Professor Suresh Das. He is Honorary Professor at the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, Thiruvananthapuram. He was former Executive Vice President, Kerala State Council for Science, Technology and Environment. and also former Director, National Institute of Science and Technology. The speakers of this session are Talapil Pradeep, Professor, Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, Professor Sabu Thomas. He was former Vice Chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi University, now with Crest Research Park. Professor Pankaj Jalo, former Director, Indraprastha Institute of Information Technology, New Delhi. Professor Jim Jose, University of Leeds, UK. I request the moderator, Professor Suresh Das, as well as the panelists to take their seats in the dais. I cordially invite Professor Suresh Das to moderate the session.
Good evening and welcome to this session on fostering research excellence and innovation. And as was mentioned, the idea of this session is to see how Kerala can leverage its strength in the field of R&D and also what it is that we can learn from some of the best institutions in the world. It may come as a surprise to many, it may or may not come as a surprise to many of you that Kerala is blessed with a really large number of excellent research institutions. If you take the city where I come from in Trivandrum, we have the CSIR Institute, we have the Rajiv Gandhi Center for Biotechnology, we have the Sri Chitra Institute for Medical Sciences, and also the Indian Space Research Organization. In fact, once Shashi Tharoor had jokingly mentioned, if Kerala is the God's own country, Trivandrum is the scientist's own city. You know, and of course, it's not just Trivandrum. We have across the state, we have really excellent institutes, both centrally funded and at the same time also the state-funded institutions. We have the universities and the associated centers of excellences. And many of these institutes are well-funded. They have very good instrumentation facilities. Their faculty are of international standards, and and also attract some of the best students from across the country. And one way to look at how well these institutes have been doing in terms of science and technology is just to look at the quality of publications. If you look at the last 3 decades, both in terms of numbers and the quality of publications, there's been a significant increase. And I'm sure my panelists will agree with me. But of course, these are the plus points. But when it comes to, so this is, basic, in terms of basic research, many of these institutes have been doing very well. But when it comes to translation of research, that's where I think that we have a large gap. Many of the research that is conducted in these institutions remain as publications and really don't reach across, into society, and we don't see them come up as benefits to society. And this is, sometimes it is also this gap between what is done in these research institutions and how these benefits across. This process is called it's called the valley of death. Many of the best inventions die before they actually make it across this bridge, bridge across to society. So what is it that we can learn from international, some of the best institutions, and how we can bridge this gap where the good quality of research that is done in these institutions can cross over to society? I can see many reasons. One, of course, is that our science students tend to be highly focused in their own subject. When we study science, there is very little study in humanities. And also, if you look at many of these institutions, as I mentioned, there is very little interaction, cross-interaction between these institutions. And again, the interaction between many of these academic organizations and industry is also very limited. So there are many steps that we need to take if we need to improve innovation and also ensure that the good quality of research that's done in these institutes actually make it across and improve the quality of life in our society. And of course, we have very distinguished panelists. As I said, we have limited time, but I will just quickly introduce them very briefly in the interest of time before I request them to give their views on how we can improve the situation in the state. The first speaker will be Professor Pradeep, who is an institute professor and professor of chemistry in the Department of Chemistry at Indian Institute of Technology. He is also the Deepak Parekh Chair. professor there. He is also a recipient of several prestigious awards, including the Padma Shri that he received in 2020 for science and technology. We have Professor Pankaj Jaloti, who is currently a distinguished professor at the Indraprastha Institute of Information Technology in Delhi. He was also the founding director of IIIT Delhi and was also vice president of Infosys. We have Professor Sabu Thomas. Of course, he needs no introduction to this audience. He was the Vice Chancellor of the Mahatma Gandhi University of Kottayam, and he is currently Chairman of the Trivandrum Engineering, Science and Technology. He is a distinguished material scientist. And then we have Professor Jin Jose, who is the Chair of the Functional Materials at the School of Chemical and Process Engineering at the University of Leeds. He is currently leading a research group in applied photon science. And it's my pleasure to welcome all these panel members to this discussion. And I will now request Professor Pradeep to make his initial statements.
I left Kerala about 38 years ago. I went to various institutions across the world, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, UC Berkeley, Stanford, and Purdue. And I have been here at IIT Madras for the past 30 years. For a change, I thought I would speak in Malayalam. And it may be a bit of a problem for a few of you, but please excuse me. I will do this in exactly 12 minutes. Devathinte സ്വന്തം നാട്. ഇത് കുറച്ച് I wanted to speak something. ഇത് എല്ലാം പെട്ടെന്ന് പറയേണ്ടതുകൊണ്ട് എഴുതിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അത് മുഴുവനായിട്ട് അങ്ങോട്ട് ശരിക്കും കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റിയില്ല എന്ന് വരും. ദൈവത്തിൻ്റെ സ്വന്തം നാട് നാളെ നിലനിൽക്കേണ്ടത് വിജ്ഞാനം കൊണ്ടാണ്. ജ്ഞാന സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥയിലേക്കുള്ള വഴിയിലാണ് കേരളം. ഇന്ത്യയും അമേരിക്കയും യൂറോപ്പും ലോകമാകെയും തുറന്നിട്ടിരിക്കുന്ന വഴിയും വ്യത്യസ്തമല്ല. വൈജ്ഞാനിക സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥ മുൻകാല സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥകളിൽ നിന്ന് ഏറെ വ്യത്യാസപ്പെട്ടിരിക്കുന്നു. ഇതിനു മുമ്പുണ്ടായിരുന്ന സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് എല്ലാവർക്കും അറിയാവുന്നതുപോലെ വ്യാവസായിക സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥയായിരുന്നു. കാർഷിക സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥയായിരുന്നു അതിനു മുമ്പുണ്ടായിരുന്നത്. വ്യാവസായിക സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥയ്ക്ക് വേണ്ടത് മുതൽ മുടക്കും സാങ്കേതിക വിദ്യയും അസംസ്കൃത വസ്തുക്കളും തൊഴിലാളികളുമായിരുന്നു. കാർഷിക സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥയ്ക്ക് വേണ്ടത് കൃഷിയിടങ്ങളും പാരമ്പര്യ വിജ്ഞാനവും തൊഴിലാളികളുമായിരുന്നു. എന്നാൽ വൈജ്ഞാനിക സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥയ്ക്ക് വേണ്ടത് 3 കാര്യങ്ങളാണ്: ഐഡിയാസ്, ടാലൻറ്റ് ആൻഡ് ഈക്കോസിസ്റ്റം. അതിനപ്പുറത്ത് ഞാൻ പലതും എഴുതിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. പക്ഷേ ഇതെല്ലാം ഇന്ന് ആവശ്യമാണെങ്കിൽ കൂടി അത്യാവശ്യമല്ല. ഉദാഹരണത്തിന് വിസ്മയിപ്പിക്കുന്ന മാറ്റങ്ങൾ വന്ന പല കൊച്ചു കൊച്ചു രാജ്യങ്ങളിലേക്ക് നോക്കിയാൽ മതി. ലോകം ഒരു മുട്ടുസൂചിയുടെ വലുപ്പത്തിലേക്ക് ചുരുങ്ങിയിരിക്കുന്നു. വിവരസാങ്കേതിക വിദ്യയുടെ വികാസം കൊണ്ട് വിജ്ഞാനമൊക്കെയും ഞൊടിയിടയിൽ കയ്യെത്തിപ്പിടിക്കാവുന്ന ദൂരത്തിലായിരിക്കുന്നു. രാജ്യാതിർത്തികളുടെ നിയന്ത്രണമില്ലെങ്കിൽ കമ്പോളങ്ങളെല്ലാം ഏവർക്കും പ്രാപ്യമായിരിക്കുന്നു. മൂലധനം മുമ്പനായിരുന്ന കാലം പോയി. ഇന്ന് ആശയമാണ് മുമ്പൻ. അതുണ്ടാവുന്നത്, ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്നത് അറിവുള്ള സർഗശക്തിയുള്ള മനുഷ്യരാണ്. അറിവ് തന്നെയാണ് പുതിയ മൂലധനം. അറിവ് പക്ഷേ അനന്തമാകുന്നു. അതുകൊണ്ട് വ്യാവസായിക സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥ വിഭവ നിയന്ത്രിതമായിരുന്നുവെങ്കിൽ ഇന്നത്തെ സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥ, വിവര സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥ വിഭവ അനിയന്ത്രിതമായിരിക്കുന്നു. അതുകൊണ്ട് ബിസിനസ് അവസരങ്ങളുടെ കുത്തൊഴുക്കാണ് ഇനി വരാൻ പോകുന്നത്. ഇന്ത്യയുടെ സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥ $4.4 ട്രില്യൺ എന്ന് ഇന്ന് രാവിലെ ചാറ്റ് GPT എന്നോട് പറഞ്ഞു. അമേരിക്കയുടേത് 28.8 ട്രില്യണാണ്. ലോകത്തിൻ്റേത് 115 ട്രില്യണാണ് 2024. പക്ഷേ ഇതൊക്കെ 2050 ആവുമ്പോൾ ഇരട്ടിയാവാൻ പോകുന്നു എന്നാണ് ചാറ്റ് GPT എന്നോട് ഇന്നും പറഞ്ഞത്.
പക്ഷേ ഒരു കാര്യം കൂട്ടി വായിക്കാനുള്ളത് എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ഇന്ത്യയുടെ GDP 9 ഇരട്ടി ആകാൻ പോകുന്നു എന്നും ChatGPT എന്നോട് പറഞ്ഞു. അപ്പോൾ സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥയിലെ കൃഷിയും വൈദ്യവും വിദ്യാഭ്യാസവും ഭക്ഷണവും ടൂറിസവും എന്നിങ്ങനെ എല്ലാം മാറാൻ പോവുകയാണ്. ആ സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥയുടെ വ്യത്യാസം മനസ്സിലാക്കണമെങ്കിൽ, അതിൻ്റെ അനിയന്ത്രിത സ്വഭാവം മനസ്സിലാക്കണമെങ്കിൽ, അതിൻ്റെ വിഭവ അനിയന്ത്രിത സ്വഭാവം മനസ്സിലാക്കണമെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് ചെറിയ ചില എക്സാമ്പിൾസ് നോക്കാം. ഗ്രീഫ് ടെക് എന്ന് നിങ്ങൾ കേട്ടിട്ടുണ്ടോ? ദുഃഖവിരാമം ആണ് ഈ സാങ്കേതിക വിദ്യ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. എന്താണ് ഏറ്റവും വലിയ ദുഃഖം? മരണമാണ് ഏറ്റവും വലിയ ദുഃഖം. അത് ദൂരീകരിക്കാമോ? അതിൻ്റെ ആഘാതം കുറയ്ക്കാമോ? മരിച്ചവരോട് സംസാരിക്കാമോ? മരിച്ചുപോയ അച്ഛനോടും അമ്മയോടും ആശയവിനിമയം ചെയ്ത് അധ്യാപകനോട് സംശയം ചോദിക്കാമോ? നമ്മുടെ കുഞ്ഞുങ്ങൾ നമ്മളില്ലെങ്കിൽ തന്നെ നമ്മുടെ പരിചരണത്തിൽ വളരാനാകുമോ? നിർമ്മിത ബുദ്ധി ഇതിനപ്പുറത്തും സാധ്യമാണ് എന്ന് പലരും പറയുന്നു. മരിച്ചുപോയ അച്ഛനുമായുള്ളൊരു സംഭാഷണത്തിന് നമ്മൾ എത്ര ചെലവഴിക്കാൻ തയ്യാറാണ്? ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള ബിസിനസ് സാധ്യതകൾ പെട്ടെന്ന് വന്നു ചേരുന്നു. ഈ ചോദ്യങ്ങളിലും ഞാൻ ചോദിക്കാൻ വിട്ടുപോയ മറ്റ് പല കാര്യങ്ങളിലും റിസർച്ചുണ്ട്, അതിലെല്ലാം ബിസിനസ്സുണ്ട്. പക്ഷെ അതിനൊക്കെ വേണ്ടത് ഒരേ ഒരു കാര്യമാണ്, സർഗശക്തിയുള്ള മനുഷ്യർ. പക്ഷേ സർഗാത്മകതയ്ക്കൊരു പ്രത്യേകതയുണ്ട്. ചിന്തയ്ക്ക് നിയന്ത്രണം വയ്ക്കുന്ന ഒരു സമൂഹത്തിൽ സർഗാത്മകത സാധ്യമല്ല. എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് സ്റ്റാൻഫോർഡിന് ചുറ്റും ഓക്സ്ഫോർഡിന് ചുറ്റുമൊക്കെ ഇങ്ങനെ വലിയ വലിയ സംരംഭങ്ങൾ വരുന്നത്? എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് സിലിക്കൺ വാലി രൂപപ്പെട്ടത്? പക്ഷേ ഇത് ചോദിക്കുമ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് അറിയുന്ന പല ഉത്തരങ്ങളുമുണ്ട്. ഇത്തരം പല കാര്യങ്ങളും നമ്മളുടെ ചുറ്റും നടക്കുന്നില്ല എന്നുള്ള കാര്യം. ഇതിനുള്ള പല കാരണങ്ങൾ സമയക്കുറവ് പോലും ഞാൻ പറയുന്നില്ല. നോക്കൂ, നമ്മുടെ കൊച്ചു താല്പര്യങ്ങൾ മനുഷ്യവംശത്തിൻ്റെയും രാഷ്ട്രത്തിൻ്റെയും താല്പര്യങ്ങൾക്ക് കുറുകെ നിൽക്കുകയാണ്. സമൂഹത്തിൻ്റെ ഒരു ഭാഗം സൃഷ്ടിന്മുഖതയ്ക്ക് കുറുകെ നിൽക്കുകയാണ്. ഈ ആമുഖം സൂചിപ്പിക്കുന്നത് കേരളത്തിന് ഇന്ന് ആവശ്യമായ ദിശകളെക്കുറിച്ചാണ്. ഒന്ന്, എങ്ങനെ പ്രാഗൽഭ്യം വളർത്തുകയും നിലനിർത്തുകയും പരിപോഷിപ്പിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യാം. രണ്ട്, പ്രാഗൽഭ്യത്തിൻ്റെ വികാസത്തിനായുള്ള സംസ്കാരം എങ്ങനെ കൊണ്ടുവരാം. നോക്കൂ, ജീർണിച്ച ഒരു സ്വർണ്ണ സംസ്കാരം പുറത്തു നിൽക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. കോളേജുകളെ അത് മുഴുവൻ മലീമസമാക്കിയിരിക്കുന്നു. സ്വർണ്ണക്കൊലുസിട്ട കുട്ടിയാണ് മുമ്പിലൂടെ ഇന്നും ഞാൻ ഈ കാണുമ്പോൾ പല ക്യാമ്പസിലും നടന്നു പോകുന്നത്. കയ്യിലും കഴുത്തിലും സ്വർണ്ണത്തോരണങ്ങളും ഒക്കെ തൂക്കിയിട്ടുള്ള ആൺകുട്ടികളെയാണ് ഞാൻ കാണുന്നത്. വിദ്യാർത്ഥി പ്രസ്ഥാനങ്ങളെങ്കിലും ഇതിൽ നിന്ന് മാറി നിൽക്കണം. സ്വർണമുള്ളവരും ഇല്ലാത്തവരും, പണമുള്ളവരും ഇല്ലാത്തവരും എന്നിങ്ങനെയുള്ള വിഭാഗങ്ങളാക്കിയിട്ട് നമ്മുടെ ക്ലാസ് മുറികളിൽ നിന്ന് വൈജ്ഞാനിക സാമൂഹ്യ വിഷയങ്ങളെ നാം മറന്നു. ഈ അപഭ്രംശത്തെ അവഗണിച്ചുകൂടെ എന്ന് പലരും എന്നോട് ചോദിച്ചു. പക്ഷേ ഈ അപഭ്രംശങ്ങൾ കാണിക്കുന്നത് നമ്മുടെ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ സ്ഥാപനങ്ങൾ പോകുന്ന വഴിയിലേക്കാണ്. ആ ജീർണതയുടെ വഴി നമ്മൾ തിരിച്ചറിഞ്ഞേ പറ്റൂ. യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റികളിലും ശാസ്ത്രം പഠിച്ചിട്ടുള്ള വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളോട് നിങ്ങൾ ഒരു അനലിറ്റിക്കൽ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ചോദിച്ചു നോക്കൂ. ആ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ്റെ ഉത്തരം വരുന്നില്ല എങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് മനസ്സിലാവും എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഒരു വിവരസാങ്കേതിക വിദ്യയുടെ പരിണിത ഫലമായിട്ടുള്ള നമ്മൾ നേരത്തെ സംസാരിച്ച വൈജ്ഞാനിക സമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥ എന്തുകൊണ്ടുണ്ടാകുന്നില്ല എന്ന്. അപ്പോൾ അറിവ് നമ്മുടെ സമൂഹത്തിൽ പ്രവർത്തിക്കുന്നില്ല. ഡിഗ്രി വലുതാകുന്നതിൻ്റെ ഒപ്പം തന്നെ ജാതിയും കൂടോത്രവും വലുതായിട്ടുണ്ട്. അപ്പം മൂന്നാമതായിട്ട് എനിക്ക് പറയാനുള്ളത്, നമുക്ക് വേണ്ടത് വിശകലനാത്മകമായ അപഗ്രഥനാത്മകമായ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസമാണ്. സമൂഹം ജ്ഞാനോൽപാദനത്തിൽ ഏർപ്പെടണമെങ്കിൽ അതിനാവശ്യമായ ഉപകരണ സംവിധാനങ്ങൾ വേണം. അപ്പോൾ നാലാമതായിട്ട് വേണ്ടത് ശാസ്ത്ര സാങ്കേതിക ഉപകരണ സംവിധാനങ്ങളാണ്. അത് പക്ഷേ ഈ പറയുന്ന സ്ഥലങ്ങളിലൊക്കെ അടുക്കി വെച്ചാൽ വിവരസാങ്കേതിക വിദ്യയുടെ പരിണിത ഫലമായിട്ട് നമുക്ക് ജ്ഞാനസമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥ ഉണ്ടാവില്ല. ആ ഇക്കോസിസ്റ്റം വളർത്താനും നിലനിർത്താനും കഴിയുന്ന മനുഷ്യരുണ്ടാകണം. എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് കേരളം പോലെയുള്ള ആയുരാരോഗ്യ സൗഖ്യമുള്ളൊരു സമൂഹത്തിൽ ജോലി സന്നദ്ധരായ മനുഷ്യർ റിട്ടയർ ചെയ്യുന്നത്? അവർ ഒരു പ്രായത്തിന് അപ്പുറം ഒഫീഷ്യലായിട്ട് റിട്ടയർ ചെയ്തു കൊള്ളട്ടെ, പക്ഷെ അവർക്ക് ജോലി ചെയ്യാനുള്ള സൗകര്യം നൽകുക തന്നെ വേണം. എങ്കിൽ മാത്രമേ ദീർഘകാലത്തെ അനുഭവജ്ഞാനം പഠന ഗവേഷണ സംരംഭങ്ങളായി പുറത്തു വരികയുള്ളൂ. കേരളത്തിൽ പാഴാക്കിക്കളയുന്ന അനുഭവജ്ഞാനത്തിൻ്റെ വലുപ്പം വളരെ വളരെ വലുതാണ്. നോക്കൂ, റിട്ടയർ ചെയ്യുന്ന ദിവസം തന്നെ അയാളെ സൈബർ ഇടങ്ങളിൽ നിന്ന് തന്നെ നമ്മൾ നിഷ്കാസിതരാക്കുകയാണ്. അനുഭവജ്ഞാനമുള്ള മനുഷ്യർക്ക് ജോലി ചെയ്യാൻ വഴിയൊരുക്കുക വഴി ജ്ഞാനസമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥയിലേക്കുള്ള ഒരു വഴി തുറന്നിടാൻ നമുക്ക് കഴിയും. കേരളത്തിന് വേണ്ടി പ്രതിഫലേച്ഛ കൂടാതെ ജോലി ചെയ്യാൻ കഴിയുന്ന ഒരു മനുഷ്യരുടെ ഒരു വലിയ സംഘാതം കേരളത്തിന് പുറത്തുണ്ട്. അത് ചിതറിക്കിടക്കുകയാണ്. അവരെ ഒരുമിപ്പിക്കേണ്ടതുണ്ട്. വിജ്ഞാനം വളർത്തേണ്ടതും സംരക്ഷിക്കേണ്ടതും ഭാവിയിലേക്ക് ഉപയുക്തമാക്കേണ്ടതും സർവകലാശാലകളാണ്. ഈ സംഭാഷണം നടക്കുന്നത് ഒരു സർവകലാശാലയിലാണെന്ന് എനിക്ക് വളരെ ചരിതാർത്ഥ്യം ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യമാണ്. പക്ഷേ ഇവിടെ നാളത്തെ കേരളത്തെക്കുറിച്ച് ആകാംക്ഷയുള്ള എല്ലാവരും വരേണ്ടതാണ്. നമുക്ക് വേണ്ടത് ഒരു പുതിയ സ്ഥാപന പൗര സംസ്കാരമാണ്. ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷണൽ സിറ്റിസൺഷിപ്പ് എന്ന് ഇംഗ്ലീഷിൽ പറയും. ഒരു സ്ഥാപനത്തിൻ്റെ വളർച്ച തൻ്റേതിൽ നിന്നും വലുതാണ് എന്ന് കരുതുന്ന ഒരു സമൂഹം ഒരു സ്ഥാപനത്തിൽ ഉണ്ടാവണം. അങ്ങനെയുള്ളൊരു ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷണൽ സിറ്റിസൺഷിപ്പ് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ എങ്ങനെ ആഗോള പ്രത്യാഘാതങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കാവുന്ന ശാസ്ത്രവും സംരംഭങ്ങളും ഉണ്ടാക്കാം എന്നാണ് ഞാൻ അടുത്ത ഒരു മിനിറ്റ് കൊണ്ട് ചോദിക്കാൻ പോകുന്നത്. കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ തനതായ ആവശ്യങ്ങളും കഴിവുകളും ഉപയോഗിക്കുകയാണ് വേണ്ടത്. കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ സമ്പത്തായിട്ടുള്ള നാളികേരം, സുഗന്ധവ്യഞ്ജനങ്ങളും മീനും ആയുർവേദവും ജൈവവൈവിധ്യവും പുതിയ ഗവേഷണങ്ങൾ ആവശ്യപ്പെടുന്നു. കേരളത്തിൽ നിന്ന് കണ്ടുപിടിക്കാവുന്ന പുതിയ എത്രയെത്ര ജന്തുസസ്യ വിഭാഗങ്ങളുണ്ട്. ഇത് ഒരു എക്സാമ്പിളാണ്. ഇതുപോലെ എന്തൊക്കെ ഉണ്ട് കേരളത്തിലെ പ്രകൃതിയുമായി ബന്ധപ്പെട്ടിട്ടുള്ള സൗന്ദര്യ സംവർദ്ധ വസ്തുക്കൾ, പുതിയ മരുന്നുകൾ, പുതിയ തരത്തിലുള്ള തന്മാത്രകൾ, അങ്ങനെ പുതിയ ധാതു ലവണങ്ങൾ, അങ്ങനെ പലതും എനിക്ക് സംസാരിക്കാൻ കഴിയും. പക്ഷെ ഇതിലാണ് നമ്മൾ ശ്രദ്ധ കേന്ദ്രീകരിക്കേണ്ടത്. ആയുർവേദവും ടൂറിസവും കടൽ വിഭവങ്ങളും ജൈവ വൈവിധ്യവും കേന്ദ്രീകരിച്ചിട്ടുള്ള ഇൻക്യുബേറ്ററുകൾ ബാംഗ്ലൂരിലെ CCAM മോഡൽ കേരളത്തിൽ ആവശ്യമാണ്. കേരളത്തിലെ മെഡിക്കൽ ടൂറിസം സാധ്യത പലരും ഉപയോഗിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. പക്ഷേ കേരളം ഒരു ക്യാൻസർ ക്യാപിറ്റലായിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഈ ക്യാൻസർ ക്യാപിറ്റലിൽ പബ്ലിക് പ്രൈവറ്റ് പാർട്ട്ണർഷിപ്പ് വഴി ആവശ്യമായ റേഡിയോ ഐസോട്ടോപ്പ് ഉണ്ടാക്കാൻ കഴിയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഞാൻ മനസ്സിലാക്കുന്നു 20,000 കോടി രൂപയുടെ ഒരു ബിസിനസ് അവിടെ കിടക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. ഇതിവിടെ സാധ്യമാണ്. കാലാവസ്ഥ വ്യതിയാനങ്ങളെപ്പറ്റി പഠിക്കാൻ കഴിയുന്ന ഗ്ലോബൽ കൊളാബറേഷൻ സെൻറ്റേഴ്സ് ഉയർന്നു വരേണ്ടിയിരിക്കുന്നു. ഈയിടെ ഒക്ലഹോമയിലെ നാഷണൽ വെതർ സെൻറ്ററിൽ പോയി ഞാൻ. ഇവിടെ കാലാവസ്ഥയിലെ സൂക്ഷ്മവും സ്ഥൂലവുമായിട്ടുള്ള വ്യതിയാനങ്ങൾ അളക്കാനുള്ള പല ടെക്നോളജികളുമുണ്ട്. അതൊക്കെയും ഡെവലപ്പ് ചെയ്യുകയും അതൊക്കെ മാനുഫാക്ചർ ചെയ്യുകയും ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു വലിയ സെൻറ്ററാണത്. ഇത്തരത്തിലുള്ള പല സെൻറ്ററുകളുമായി ചേർന്ന് ISROയുമായി ചേർന്ന് കേരളം കരയിലും കടലിലും ആകാശത്തിലും നിന്ന് കാലാവസ്ഥ വ്യതിയാനങ്ങളെ നിരീക്ഷിച്ചാൽ അത് ദൂരവ്യാപകമായിട്ടുള്ള ഫലങ്ങളുണ്ടാക്കും. ഞാൻ ഒരു മിനിറ്റ് കൊണ്ട് അവസാനിപ്പിക്കാം. എമർജിംഗ് ടെക്നോളജികളെ കണ്ടെത്താനും പരിപോഷിപ്പിക്കാനും വേണ്ട നോളജ് ഫൗണ്ടറി, അതനുബന്ധിച്ചിട്ടുള്ള ഇൻക്യുബേറ്ററുകളും അത്യാവശ്യമാണ്. ഇത്തരത്തിലുള്ള ചില ടെക്നോളജികളാണ് ലാബറട്ടറിയിൽ വളർത്തുന്ന ഡയമണ്ട്, ലാബറട്ടറിയിൽ വളർത്തുന്ന വജ്രം, ഗ്രീഫ് ടെക്, AI ഇനേബിൾഡ് എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ, അതിൻ്റെ മൾട്ടിറ്റ്യൂഡായിട്ടുള്ള ഡിഫറെൻറ്റ് ഡയമെൻഷൻസ്, പല കാര്യങ്ങളും അങ്ങനെ പറയാൻ കഴിയും. എല്ലാവർക്കും കടന്നു വരാവുന്ന വൈജ്ഞാനിക സംവാദങ്ങൾക്ക് വഴിയൊരുക്കുന്ന ഇടങ്ങളായി സർവകലാശാലകളും ഗവേഷണ സ്ഥാപനങ്ങളും മാറ്റാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടില്ല എങ്കിൽ പുതിയ തലമുറ മറ്റു രാജ്യങ്ങളിലേക്ക് ചേക്കേറും. അപ്പോൾ ജ്ഞാനസമ്പദ് വ്യവസ്ഥ ഒരു പ്രതീക്ഷ മാത്രമായി തീരും. ഇത് മുന്നിൽ കണ്ടുകൊണ്ട് നമ്മൾ ആക്ഷൻ ചെയ്തേ പറ്റൂ. അവയുടെ വിശദാംശങ്ങൾ ഞാൻ പലയിടത്തായിട്ട് പലതവണ എഴുതിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. അവ ചോദ്യങ്ങളായിട്ട് വരുമെന്ന് പ്രതീക്ഷിക്കണു. സമയം ഏറെ വൈകിപ്പോയിരിക്കുന്നു എന്ന് മാത്രം പറയാം. എൻ്റെ അച്ഛനും അമ്മയും ടീച്ചേഴ്സായിരുന്നു, സ്കൂൾ അധ്യാപകരായിരുന്നു. 52 വർഷം മുമ്പ് അച്ഛൻ എഴുതിയ ഒരു ചെറിയ കവിതയുണ്ട്. കൊയ്ത്തിനിറങ്ങുക എന്ന കവിതയിൽ 2-3 വരി ഞാൻ പറയാം. നാളെ തീർക്കും പുതിയൊരു ലോകം, നേടാൻ പോകുക കൊയ്ത്തിന്, കറ്റ ചുമക്കാൻ കൊയ്ത്തുമെതിക്കാൻ, അകവും പുറവും അറയും പറയും, നിറ പൊലി പൊലി പാടി നിറയ്ക്കാൻ. ഞാനും പോകും നിക്ഷണമതിനാൽ പൂമണിമേടം വെടിഞ്ഞേ പോകുക, വേഗം വേഗമനേകം, ഉണ്ണികൾ നമ്മുടെയല്ലോ, ഉണ്ണികൾ നമ്മുടെയല്ലോ. ഞാനിവിടെ എത്തിയത് അതുകൊണ്ടും മാത്രമാണ്. ഉണ്ണികൾ നമ്മുടെയല്ലോ. അവർക്ക് രാഷ്ട്രീയ, സാമൂഹ്യ, ജാതീയ അതിർവരമ്പുകളില്ല. നമസ്കാരം.
Thank you, Dr. Pradeep. I will now invite Professor Pankaj Jalote for his statement.
Otherwise, I'll use it. Oh, there you go, there you go. No, it's there. Okay, done. Slide changer. Yeah, great, thanks. Okay, I'll just start 10 minutes. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Last session of the day, I guess everyone's tired. And let's see. So I'm going to talk about fostering research excellence straight onto it. First, we know, and this is fostering research excellence in academic institutions, higher education. So we all know that there are 3 missions. I just want to put it back, put it in perspective. We're not talking research in isolation. And higher education institution has education as the first mission, the primary mission. Research is, of course, a core mission for universities. And now innovation or third mission is there. I want to point out here, innovation in the research context, in the university context, ought to be research driven, not just arbitrary innovation. Okay, having said that, I just want to first quickly say what is research excellence, and then make out 3 points. So without going into much detail, I say research, a university has research excellence if it has a large volume of research, of course, that is research intensive, lots of research happens. It's high quality, impactful research. So research that impacts other research that impacts innovation, so it's high quality research. And I add this, which is important in the Indian context, the faculty that you have, the research faculty, which is really responsible for all the research, is able to achieve what they are capable of. Okay. So having said that, now let's just come to 3 points that I want to make. So first point, research excellence universities. Not all universities need to aspire for research excellence. Actually, this cannot happen. This just cannot happen. Some are needed as they need to be, and they need to be supported disproportionately by the society, the government, and so on. You just cannot have all universities as research universities. So only a few, say top 10, 20%, can afford to be intensive research universities. Only they can get the funding because after all the resources are limited. Only they can attract the good research faculty. They are not infinite in supply, unlike general engineering, manpower or whatever. Research faculty is a very scarce resource. You don't get too many of them. So they can attract. Teaching will remain a key mission, but it's research intensive means that they have typically lesser teaching load. So if you go to the institutions, IITs, etc., that I belong to, have spent time, the teaching load would be 1 course a semester. A lot of our time goes into this thing. Now the second point is most universities actually should aspire for teaching excellence with modest research to keep teaching up to the mark. Because if you don't engage in research, your teaching will become outdated in due course in a short while. So teaching is the important mission, and research engagement is there. Now I want to point this out because in this hoopla about ranking, which gives certain weight to research, and then all this talk about it, what we are having is a vast majority of reasonably good universities all aspiring to do research, but they don't really have the capability to do it. With the result, they're ending up with mediocre research and mediocre education. I really wanted to make this point. Only some universities can excel in research, and it is a differentiated system that we must have. Okay, having said that, I know many of you may not sort of agree with it, but that's all right. So I'll just point out a few enablers. So having established that, research excellence in a reasonable number of universities, what are the main enablers? How do you make a university excellent in research? What are the enablers for it? Okay, so I just put down 4 or 5. I'm not going to go in details of these, but clearly the first and foremost is how is faculty recruited and how are they groomed? Because it's the faculty that drives all the research in it. Even the students, the postdocs, the PhD students, all work around the faculty. The faculty is the nucleus. So how is the faculty research recruited, and how are they mentored, governed, and promoted to really stay in research excellence is an important point. The research culture, I'll spend a little time on it because it's sort of trend, but I'll try to put down some pointers as to what is the research culture. And a large and rigorous PhD program, because again, you cannot, faculty doesn't all do research on their own. They need people they need the research manpower to help them do, which is largely PhD students. Funding and support, extremely important. Research is very expensive, and size and interdisciplinarity. Okay, I'll just spend 1 or 2 minutes on 1 minute on some of them, but research culture. So what is research culture? And that if you go to a great institute versus a mediocre, you can sort of sense it. First and foremost, expectation of high quality research. There is expectation of research, Scopus Index, there's that kind of publication. There's expectation of publication versus expectation of high quality research. Okay? And that some institutes, those who would want to have research excellence, have to promote expectations of high quality research. Okay, and then there are various motivation of faculty, etc., has to be there. And for expectation, you need to have proper rewards and recognition and all that for research. It's not equal society in research. Not all are equal, unfortunately. That's the key. And there's good work ethics and good research ethics have to be there. They are very important. So just wanted to set up what does it mean for research culture. This is fairly straightforward, large and rigorous PhD program, and therefore the PhD programs are, by the way, undergoing certain amount of change in the current world, and one will need to, if you want to be research excellent, you'll have to redefine your PhD program in line with what is happening in the world. Funding, I just want to mention, research universities are extremely expensive. You need expensive labs, library, high quality equipment, etc. PhD program is also very expensive. And because the teaching load has to be low, you need far more people to actually have in your faculty. So funding is perhaps one of the most critical component in deciding success. And if you look at top global universities, and I've done some work on looking at their funding, the basic funding as well as research funding is very, very large. Funding situation in India for higher education, unfortunately, has been generally modest because in our case, in our country, much of the R&D budget goes into the research labs rather than higher education institutions, unlike almost all the developed countries. So research excellence institutions need to be supported disproportionately, there is no doubt about it. Size and multidisciplinarity, I'll just show you a chart and this will just make the point. Our universities tend to be small. So I've got some numbers here, the top 200 in the world and the top 200 from India, and the faculty strength and the student strength. We won't go through the table, but the point to look at is size in terms of student strength, less than 5,000 students. This is 4, 5 years old analysis. PHE had only 5, while in India, top 200, more than 50% were there. And you come to the large ones, size more than 10K, The THE had 182, almost all of them, all of the 200, while we had only 30. And if you go to the faculty size of less than 500, only very few. In India, vast majority, 173, all smallest institutions. Now they're getting bigger, some of them. And the size more than 1,000 was there. So size matters, and with size comes interdisciplinarity also. You can't just have size in computing or engineering, you will build multidisciplinarity, and that sort of helps this thing. So last point, yes, I have my clock going. So last point, what is the main hindrance for research? And I wanted to, so this is I think for a long time I believe faculty complacency is the biggest hindrance to excellence in research in higher education. Okay? And there are lots of reasons of it. Quality of PhD programs, while our PhD programs in numbers may be fairly large, the quality in many, many institutions is something to worry about, and the systems are not there. And research culture, we still seem to be very enamored by positions of power rather than being a top scientist or what have you. So I'll end here, and I'm 9 minutes into it. Thank you very much.
Now I invite Professor Sabu Thomas.
Thank you, Professor Suresh Das, and all the panelists, and many thanks to Professor Gurikal and team for the kind invitation. Dear colleagues, I represent Mahatma Gandhi University for the last 37 years. Our university was started in 1983. Within 40 years of history, we have come up within 500 in world ranking. And we got the A++ for the NAC accreditation. We are well ranked in NIRF. I also represent Trivandrum Engineering, Science and Technology Research Park. The idea of this park is connect the academia with the industry. Right now we have 10 companies 8 companies in the park, and we connect academia and industry extremely well. And now, coming to the topic of my research, of the research excellence, one of the important points that we should trust is, for a university system or college, we need to have excellent faculty members. The quality benchmark is very important. Excellent faculties have to be appointed in universities and colleges. There should not be any compromise on that. Number 2, we need to have adjunct faculties, visiting professors from abroad, visiting professors from industry. And I understand that several colleges, for example, private colleges, the faculties are actually paid very low salary. I think all the colleges, private colleges, private universities should follow UGC regulations. Universities should have a lot of supporting staff. When you have machines, instruments, we need to have supporting staff. We need to have scientists, level positions at the universities. Then only we can maintain a good laboratory. Coming to infrastructure within the department and school, very important. We need to have good laboratories. Inside the university, we should have centralized facility. That's what we have done in Mahatma Gandhi University. Centralized facility in the state. For example, synchrotron facility in the state. Or small angle X-ray scattering, transmission electron microscopy. Such centralized facilities have to be developed in the state. Beautiful campus, good hostels, guest house, cafeteria, they're all very important for a good ecosystem. Coming to the area of research, I would always recommend local problems. Faculty should, look at local issues, local problems, local resources. At the same time, we should work on frontier areas of science and technology. It could be engineering, it could be humanities, or it could be social science, but we should, work on frontier areas, challenging problems. You should make use of AI and robotics. And SDG should be our developmental goals. Coming to, faculty members and research scholars should read well. Particularly, I recommend Science and Nature regularly. I remember when I started, when I read Nature paper, we had a good hint on self-healing. That's why I started, self-healing work put 10 years ago. So we must regularly read high-ranking journals. Then only we can have critical thinking innovation. Coming to research, we have to be extremely interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary. That's extremely important. If you want to be a good nano scientist, you should know chemistry, physics, biological sciences, mathematics. So we should work in a very, very interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary level. Look at the integration of research. If you look at the interdisciplinary research, where discipline A, discipline B, discipline C, they integrate. Coming to funding, that is, funding is extremely important. If you look at India, for research, the amount of funding is something like 0.7% of GDP. I think we should give good funding for research. Funding within the university, for example, seed money, when a new faculty joins, faculty should be paid some initial grant. State funding, national funding, international funding, industry funding, funding from companies, hybrid funding, philanthropic funding. I think we should explore all these funding possibilities by the faculty members. Research collaboration, I would say local. Within the university, within the college, you should cooperate. Chemistry, physics, mathematics, you should cooperate well and submit good proposals. Regional cooperation, national cooperation. I always like the French model. If you look at CNRS and universities, they work very closely. When I go to a French university, I mostly share the CNRS laboratory. So we need to have very, very high level of national cooperation, international cooperation. Industrial funding, if you look at France, I cooperate with France quite a lot. 70% of funding in French universities come from industry. So we need to have a high level of industrial funding. Funding from your alumni, that's very, very important. You can tap. Look at IIT Madras, Pradeep's Institute. A lot of funding from alumni. How to tap industry funding? Universities should organize academy-university interface meeting. It could be discipline-based. Faculty should visit small and medium and large-scale industries. Industrial consultancy. Faculties have to be consultant to industries, and you need to have, regulations for that. What should be the industrial consultancy fees, and what could be the share of the faculty members and students. I would always recommend triple helix model. Any research project funded by the industry, there should be a share from the from government. So I could achieve many grants where industry was a partner. So I request faculty members should adopt sort of triple helix model in research funding, where you have a component from industry, component from government, and university faculty members and scholars work on it. Second point is, when you have a research group, you should have postdocs, PhD students, master students, bachelor students. See, for example, in my own research group, my postdocs supervise, my PhD students and master students and bachelor students. It's a good network. Coming to publications are extremely important. We should write very good reviews, high-impact publications, never publish in predatory journals. We have to be extremely careful in plagiarism, book chapters, books and monographs, special issues. They're all very, very important. Weekly seminars and meetings. My colleague said rigorous PhD program. PhD programs have to be made extremely rigorous. Presentations, weekly seminars, lab discussions. All these things have to be done in a very, very rigorous manner. Conference and workshops are very, very important. Regional conferences, national conferences, international conferences. These are very, very important. These are very important because they give a lot of possibility for networking and collaborations. Attend conference and workshop. Extremely important. Patents and translation. Professor Suresh Das said, Kerala is doing well in research, but look at the translation level. That's why we work in Trust Research Park. We connect academia and industry. We had a brilliant faculty from United States, from University of Akron. Akron is a center for rubber research worldwide. When the Akron professor came to Mahatma Gandhi University, what he said? If you invent something in the laboratory, don't publish immediately, you go for a patent. Something scalable, they go for a patent. Then he said, don't stop there. Go for a good publication in a high-impact journal. And then don't stop. Go for incubation. Startup companies. And every university and college should have a Section 8 company. That's extremely important. Then only some of the findings could be translated into real products. Look at Mahatma Gandhi University. Our Vice Chancellor is also here. See, we have a MGU Innovation Foundation. And this is a Section 8 company. And we have 20 small companies working in our university. And faculty members and students contribute. We started something similar like IT Madras Research Park. And this is our company in the campus. We have 20 small companies are working in the campus where students and faculty members contribute. Massive level of decentralization is extremely important for universities. Single window policies, dignified faculty life. I know faculties have lots of trouble at the universities. When you submit a proposal, lots of issues. And there should be very modest decentralization, dignified student life. Very important. I also recommend private universities in the state of Kerala. Private Universities Act should be brought to Kerala. Deemed to be universities to be established here. And as Pradeep suggested, very high level of public-private partnership. Extremely important for research. Internationalization, very important. We should have visiting professors coming to our department. Our faculty should go abroad. Postdocs from abroad, our postdocs should go abroad, inbound and outbound. Exchange of master students, exchange of bachelor students is very, very important. That's what Mahatma Gandhi University is doing. We are able to send most of our master students abroad, and we get a lot of students from abroad to our campus. My concluding remarks, you see, funding is extremely important. We need to get a lot of funding. Excellent faculty members should be appointed in colleges and universities. Good infrastructure, very good research ecosystem, high level of networking. That's very important for research. Internationalization, interdisciplinary approach. And dear colleagues, public-private partnership is very, very important. A lot of possibilities for public-private partnership. Mahatma Gandhi University got a good philanthropy funding recently for drug discovery. We approached a gentleman, a doctor, he contributed quite a good amount of money. I think if we explore, there are a lot of possibilities for research in universities in Kerala. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sabatamos. Now I invite Professor Jinjos.
Hello. Thank you, Professor Das. So first let me thank the organizers for this initiative, which is very timely, and hopefully this will lead to landmark change in the higher education sector of Kerala. I've been observing the Kerala's higher education sector from outside. I am a product of this Kerala's higher education. When you see from outside, we want to see changes happening in our higher education system at a fast pace. So when you look at the rankings of the universities, we did extremely well in Kerala. Our universities are ranked high nationally and internationally. If you consider the investment into these universities and the number of faculty members and the students in these institutions, we can say that we did much better than what we can achieve. It's the best value for money. That's all good words, and I stop there, and I have to move into certain realities of Kerala's higher education sector, which we are facing, and we should be addressing it if you want to move forward credibly and strongly. So we know that in the higher education sector in Kerala, we are a state in which the population is gradually dropping, and the number of students entering higher education is dropping. The number of students joining our colleges and our engineering colleges are dropping, and many seats are vacant, and this is reality of the situation. And when we consider our universities, this has been the same message Professor Jalot has mentioned. They are small universities. I'm in the largest or biggest single campus university in the state. This is the Kochi University of Science and Technology. I was also an alumni of this university. If we consider the size of this university, we have about 350 faculty members and about 8,000 plus students. Is that enough? And the number of, and this is the biggest university, if you think about, in Kerala. Is it represents all disciplines? We have a higher education council we have in the state. Is the higher education council is inclusive of all disciplines of higher education in disciplines of higher education like the medicine, the agriculture, the engineering, and so on. We are not represented. We are talking about arts and humanities and science when we talk about higher education in Kerala. What is it? Is that inclusive? Is that multidisciplinary? We don't have a comprehensive multidisciplinary university in the state. This is the reality. We don't have a medical college in this campus. We don't have all the engineering aspects covered in here. We have agricultural, which is another university, and it is being supported by other departments and so on. So first of all, we have a scattered, fractured higher education system in Kerala, which is not fit for purpose to address the future challenges that our state and globally what we are facing. So what are these challenges? We talk about sustainability. We talk about water, food, energy, and so on. Is our university equipped, health, and so on, which is very important in environment, very important for our state. Is our universities well equipped to address these challenges? How can we address these challenges? To address these challenges, we have to be multidisciplinary. We need to have a university which is comprehensive, and we are not ready for that. So we need to address this challenge of this scattered university structure. We need to bring all disciplines under the Higher Education Council. I've been a very ardent critic of Higher Education Council for many reasons, because of the patience is running out in terms of the faculty, the students, and the different stakeholders in the higher education sector. The patience is running out. We need to see changes happening fast. We need to reform, restructure, and rebrand. Otherwise, we will perish. This is the situation. So I've been a bit provocative. Without addressing these issues, how can we address the challenges? How can we address the demands of the students? We are not good enough in that respect. So we need to create different types of levels of administration, levels of policy making, levels of investment, financial models for the universities, and so on. I'll come into specific proposals I want to make in this respect. So I'm putting this in the context of the challenges that we are facing, and we see from looking from outside. This is like a bird's eye view. We compare our university with the several other universities in the world, and we compare our universities in the rest of Kerala. We are doing, rest of India. We are doing extremely well. And all these things I have mentioned here are equally important for India as well. Okay, it's not just a Kerala problem. We have these regulatory agencies which are controlled by the central government, or what you call the union government, and so if the regulatory agencies are responsible for appointing a professor in the university, and if that university is not performing, who is at fault? Is the university or the regulatory agencies? So what kind of role these regulatory agencies are taking in Indian education concept, in the higher education sector, is really ill-prepared, and is damaging to the higher education sector. And it's nothing we have achieved in the last 60 years by these kind of regulations. So they are not fit for purpose for the future of our higher education. So this needs to be addressed. We need, as students, as faculty, we have to show that, we have to say strongly, these are very important, we should to going forward. So a couple of points to make. One is multidisciplinarity. So that's a big thing we have already mentioned in the previous thing. So we need to make universities which are comprehensive and multidisciplinary. How can we do that? We have several university acts in Kerala. We have several, about 14, 15 universities for different languages, different subjects, and so on. This is not going to help in creating or attracting international talent into Kerala. We need to have an ecosystem within the university, and when you say the ecosystem is higher education, research, and innovation. These are the three pillars. So we need to be strong in these three pillars. So in order to be strong, we had to be multidisciplinary. And the point is research-led teaching. If you want to do research-led teaching, we need to have enough critical mass of faculty members in each school and each faculty. So if you look at Mahatma Gandhi University, how this example of here,
How many faculty members are there? It's less than 100 faculty members. So how can we compete globally with the 100 faculty members? How can we bring in new courses? How can we bring new degrees? How can we quickly change our syllabuses and so on? We haven't got the critical mass to do this research in this sector. So we need to look at this. And the second point is about, okay, I think I kind of covered. So the school I am working right now have got 65 faculty members. Just compare the size of the university and the school that I'm working in there. There's 40,000 students in the university I'm studying. It's about the ability to innovate and ability to bring out changes within the system. You need a critical mass in any educational organization. So this is my strong view on these aspects. So the objectives of reforms to our higher education sector should be to enhance multidisciplinarity, research excellence, student experience, and employability with a strong commitment to equality, diversity, and inclusion in the sector. How can we achieve this? My strong belief is that the status quo is damaging and unsustainable, and we must reform or we will perish. There are 4 points I would want to make. We need to perhaps bring in a Kerala Universities Act so that this sector could be organized much better. So this act should enable multidisciplinarity to create better management structure, strong leadership, better structure and organization of the whole sector, EDI, sustainability, research and innovation. So the second point is we need big investment in the sector to go up significantly under a master plan. A new financial model is needed. Student experience must improve. We don't assess the students. The students are not, we are assessing the students, but the students are not assessing the system here. Our education system, our teaching, our students are not assessing. We are not bringing that change in the system so far. Even when I was a student, this has been under discussion. Improve enhanced infrastructure. If we bring in all these things, we have a huge potential to attract students from other states, from abroad. Internationalization is cross-culture. So we need to be attracting students, faculty, and all that, and it's not encouraging students to go abroad and study. We have to be able to retain our best talents here and also to attract the best talents globally. Alongside this, we need to reform the research funding as well. Perhaps creating a state research funding agency. We are giving 20 crores to one project, another 20 crores to another project here and there, and creating centers. It's very scattered. We cannot sustain such a system. It's not organized. So we need to create a research funding agency under which we can manage all the research-related centers and sustain its funding and so on. So this is my higher secondary education. I'm not going into that, but that's a big problem that is affecting the higher education sector. This needs to be addressed as well. Can Kerala lead the way? So yes, we can and we must for the sake of future generation, and we have to start now. This should be the starting point. We cannot wait anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jinjos. Our panel members have raised many issues. As all of you will agree, the state indeed has some strengths, but there are many areas that require urgent attention, as was highlighted by each of the panel members. I won't try to summarize it because of lack of time, but I think we can take a few questions from the audience.
Thank you. I have a comment and a question, both suggested by Professor Jalote's stimulating presentation. The comment is this. He mentioned a differentiated academic system, and that is absolutely necessary. And what this country, what this state needs is to make some careful decisions about which are the research-intensive institutions in the state, and those should probably be only a few, 2, 3, 4, maybe, and the rest focusing on teaching. And that's not an easy thing to do, but if you're going to infuse the kind of resources that have been mentioned, you have to do that. And then make sure that the professors in the teaching-focused universities are appropriately respected for teaching and are not expected to do much research. In other words, their work is research-informed rather than research-producing. And my question is this. I was on a Russian government commission a while ago that one of the things they were trying to do is to integrate the institutes of the Russian Academy of Science, which is a very large specialized research institution, set of research institutions. If you think the Indian system has a lot of these, the Russians are much heavier. And they understood, and our commission agreed, that the best research is done in university contexts, not in specialized research institutions. So the question is this: can you do this in India? Is it a good idea? And how?
So yes, in India, historically, there was all these centers for research, CSIR, DAE, It was needed at that time. I think so, because they were mission mode. ISRO is still mission mode. But as you pointed out, globally it has been observed that the best research and competitive research is happening in the universities. And also, globally, the model is that the research labs, they don't need to disappear. They need to partner and be within the university while maintaining autonomy. There are multiple models of it. You mentioned this thing. So it's not the model problem. It can be done, and I think it should be done. There is, to my mind, no reason why the synergies ought not to be tapped. A university, maybe 4 or 5 government labs within the university with appropriate things built in, making a bigger university and therefore bigger scale, and the labs also benefiting from the fact that they can access PhD and master students. Having said that, whether it's going to happen or not, that's a completely political decision. I don't think it's a decision about academic merit or whether it will help education or research. I think those arguments can be very easily made, but the decision is likely to be for different reasons, whatever the decision may be. I don't see any movement in that direction, by the way.
I'm Professor Shaji from University of Kerala. I have 2 questions. One is, in the affiliated colleges of the government of Kerala, we have many excellent teachers, but we are not providing them adequate facility to do research. How to tap that pool? That's number 1. Number 2, we have, suppose if you take example of University of Kerala, we are producing more than 500 PhDs per annum. So whether we are, screening that PhDs, whether that has a potential to make it a translational aspect or a patent aspect. So what policy we can make for that aspect?
To answer that, the colleges mostly focus on teaching. However, the faculty members of colleges can really apply for research funding. Research funding, DST, DBT, or DRDO, they can really apply for research funding. And number 2, colleges faculty in the colleges can definitely interact with the universities. For example, Mahatma Gandhi University has a very, very good centralized facility. They're open to all the colleges. And there won't be any problem utilizing our facilities. At the same time, faculty members can really submit proposals and get funding. There are a lot of possibilities. And you talked about the number of PhDs being produced at the universities. I think the PhDs program should be made more rigorous. There should be a good number of publications, and the program should be made rigorous, as my colleague said.
Hello, so my name is Stefan Vincent Lancrin, and I just wanted to follow up on the comment that Phil made, and and some of the discussions. So one of my friends, Jamil Salmi, is a big champion of world-class universities and actually on concentrating the research in a few places. And I think it's very important indeed if you want to have international visibility and to attract students and researchers, etc. On the other hand, there are a few systems, France, you've mentioned it, Germany, which actually have a lot of, not so great singular universities, but have a good system, so they don't have a lot of universities in the top 10 in the rankings, but in the top 500, and actually most of the universities are there. And so when you talk about the size of the universities and the fact that you have a lot of small, excellent universities, which used to be the case in France, before they merged under the pressure of the university rankings, without being sure that the institutions are totally merged institutionally, actually. But of course, it has popped up the rankings, so that was the intention was materialized. So I'm thinking, there are two models. One is actually one that, and I had discussion with Jamil sometimes, one where, you think, I'm a football fan, and actually Barcelona and Real Madrid are the best, and so I want to put all my money in these two teams, so that I have a great championship. And then there is the NBA model, where actually what we try to do is to have a good competition, and so that all the teams remain good, and so we make sure that everyone is actually funded. So how does that actually reflect on where you could go, in Kerala in terms of organizing, this excellence, given where you are here?
Thank you. So some of my experience experience back in India, teaching back in India and so on. So most of the engineering institutions and medical institutions in India are teaching institutions. And that because of that, the research in India in engineering and medicine is far below science and humanities. In that respect, I see the universities are doing great. The arts and humanities and social science faculties and universities are doing much better than engineering and medicine in terms of research and innovation, I would say. So the problem is, now we created these different layers of colleges, including IITs, were initially more teaching oriented. It's only recently there was a lot of support on research. Very few places have support for research. So we need to create that culture of multidisciplinary research, intensive universities in India in general. That's what I say. It's mostly teaching oriented. So when it's only teaching oriented, what is happening is that these institutions fall into a trap of just teaching the same stuff over and over and over without being innovative in their teaching methods or syllabus or curriculum. Even if you try to impose it from the top, the quality will, it's never going to go up, either go down or stay where it is. It's not, it creates the status quo. And then on top of this, you've got all these different regulatory organizations, Medical Council and Engineering, AICT, what you call it, University Grants Commission. They regulate each different disciplines. And this is creating much more complexity. For example, if the regulatory authorities say you have to appoint a vice chancellor based on these characteristics, and they can only appoint that particular person, how can that ensure that the university will perform? It should be, what they should do is that they make the universities accountable rather than making appointments. So that the universities, okay, you have to produce this much like of student satisfaction, research output. These are the parameters we will measure you. It's up to you who you appoint and who you take on, what work you do within, what administration structure you have within the universities. If you don't give that freedom, this is not going to change. This is really over-regulating. Every 2 years you get a new regulation, and then the institutions try to match that. And for all these different levels of ranking, is creating additional layer of difficulty for the existing faculty, diminishing their morale, hard work, they have to put a lot of effort. We are not accounting for these factors. So Indian education system, we have huge prospects and future, but we need to be ready to make changes which are very objective and future, looking into the future so that we can excel. We don't have a single university which we can match to the top-ranking universities in China. Just think about, we are equal-sized economies. So now what we are talking about? Yeah, the small country like Singapore, you have got 2-3 world-class universities. You can't create one world-class university. Then what can we do? The Indian Institute of Science is probably the highest ranked, again, Indian Institute of Science. Yeah, it's not a comprehensive university to start with. It's now trying to become. So we are not addressing these issues adequately. We are not funding the institutions as well. The research funding has dropped. There were a lot of fellowships for PhDs. I was a recipient of a national fellowship to do PhD, and which helped me to do the PhD. Now they have taken away all of that. There's no fellowships for the PhD students. We are a country at its developing phase needs the support of the government to grow in education and in all sectors. Without that support, it cannot happen. So this is the basic premise in which I'm putting these points across. Thank you.
Just want to add one point here. The post-independent India, the technological muscle of India, today we call that examples are, let us say, Indian Steel, Indian ISRO, or atomic energy. They were all built by the universities. No doubt, they were built by the universities. Contributions to those institutions that we built from IITs, from IISc directly. In IISc indirectly, yes, substantial, through colleges, but directly, they were minimal. So universities built this, and if you have to look at India from now, another 35 years, India at 100, India, if it has to be built by universities, the universities have to be strengthened. Those universities which contributed to the past India, they are non-existent or decaying today. The message that it takes me to is that it is important to have centers of excellence, a few centers of excellence, but a large number of reasonably good universities to build India. Otherwise, we are going to see a decline in India's technological muscle.
Thank you. I think we've had a very interesting discussion. The presentations have stimulated a lot of discussions. I thank all my panelists and thank the audience. And I also take this opportunity to thank Professor Rajan Gurukul and Professor Rajan Varghese for organizing this wonderful conference. And with these words, I thank all of you once again. Thank you.
With this, we come to the end of the third plenary session on fostering research excellence and innovation. Sincere thanks to the moderator, Professor Suresh Das, and the speakers, Professor T. Pradeep, Professor Sabu Thomas, Professor Pankaj Jalot, and Professor Jin Jose for their very lively speeches during the session. Also, thanking your audience also for your active participation. Thank you. With this, we are coming to the conclusion of the plenary sessions. We have arranged a very beautiful cultural program presented by RLV College of Music and Fine